An average guy somehow finds himself in the DC universe. By some sort of miracle, he didn't go mad and ended up planning an escape. He nearly succeeded. Perhaps he succeeded a little too much. The DC universe lost a potential hero, but that doesn't mean he can't be one in another place. The only problem is that the line between friend and foe is truly blurred here. Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as a Kryptonian in Marvel, Part 1. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story, linked in the description.
Syrian Vex knew death, and he didn't fancy his chances of going through that horrible and cold feeling once again. It was not entirely true, as Syrian didn't exactly know death. Before he became Syrian of House Vex in Krypton, he had another name and was just an employee of a bank working in the HR department. Unfortunately, fate decided to throw a curveball in the form of a car accident that left him in the hospital for a week. At the end of that week, he died from internal bleeding, which the doctors were too late to find. He knew he was going to die, and he dearly wished some miracle would save him. That didn't stop his vision from going dark and a terrible cold spreading from his legs to his head. His last memory was the red, puffy eyes of his girlfriend, whom he should have treated a bit better in retrospect. Contrary to his leap into the unknown abyss that was death, he woke up into the light, and a whole new world was waiting for him. It took him only a few months to piece together exactly what happened and where he was. Somehow, he ended up in the fictional DC universe, and that too in Krypton before the planet went boom. Strangely enough, he was born into the House of Vex, which was supposed to die out with Nyssa Vex. Instead, he learned that he was a descendant of Nyssa's sister, Celia Vex, who happened to be his grandmother. He couldn't care less about that as he was bombarded with the enormity of the situation he was in at the moment. His wish had been granted, and now he lived as Syrian Vex, albeit in a world that only existed in fiction. The situation became all the more problematic because he was living on a planet that was a ticking time bomb, not to mention there were very dangerous beings lurking out in the galaxy. He also feared the circumstances behind his rebirth, as it could only happen with quirky, omnipotent beings. He feared what that meant, as every human soul was just a piece of entertainment for some random all-powerful beings, or did this happen by some cosmic mojo? He didn't know. What he knew for sure was that he didn't want to die again. Staying in Krypton was a death sentence, and he had no idea the exact year or date the whole thing would go boom. The only thing he knew for sure was that it would explode into 1,000 pieces shortly after Kal-El was born. Therefore, his only option was to somehow escape the planet of doom at the exact moment of Kal-El's escape or perhaps even before that if he was lucky. With this simple plan in mind, Syrian began his new life in Krypton. 10 years into his life, he realized that escaping Krypton before Kal-El's birth was just a pipe dream and an impossible one at that. Krypton's deep space defense security systems ensured no unauthorized hyperspace launches were possible. Most planets had space defenses for threats from beyond space, but Krypton focused its firepower on its own people to prevent them from space travel. The security was too tight, and gravity wells were placed around the planet to ensure nothing went in or out without the express permission of the Kryptonian military. At this point he realized that his time of escape had to align with Zod's military coup. He had no intention of standing in the guy's way, as he didn't fancy dying at the general's hands. He also doubted he could somehow influence the Kryptonian Council to start preparing for an immediate evacuation. If Jor-El and Druzod couldn't do it, then he was certainly not the guy to convince the Council, and that was if the Council would even hear him. The House of Vex were very influential, but because of their association with the previous administration, they were very much on the blacklist. It took his father and mother every scrap of goodwill to even be allowed as low-ranking members in the Lawmakers Guild. It took a lot of bribes and his father's marriage to a distant relative of one of the council members to earn that goodwill. His own birth, which the Oracle predicted, and his subsequent fate to be a good member of the Science Guild also helped somewhat. This ensured the future of the Vex family lay in science and research rather than politics. He didn't complain about his supposed fate one bit, as that was exactly what he wanted. Being in the military guild would put him under Zod, but he would be exposed to Jor-El in the science guild. At least he hoped he would be exposed to the man before everything went nuts. So, knowing that his life was at stake, Sirian put his entire being into education. His distant relationship with Jor-El helped speed up his entry into the Science Guild. At the age of 15, he managed to enter the guild, and for 1 year, he worked as an apprentice to Jor-El. Working under Jor-El made him realize how much of a genius the man was. Jor-El was working on a ton of projects all at once. Alternate energy, increased range of phantom drives, monitoring the seismic activities of Krypton, and research into artificial intelligence were some of the few areas that Jor-El was researching. The guy was Krypton's foremost scientific expert in about every major field. He recommended that Sirian be selected for the research team that focused on alternate energy, more specifically, energy extraction from antimatter. It was a project under the direct oversight of the KRYPTONIAN Council and Jor-El. The facility had yet to extract the energy sufficiently, as research was ongoing, but the results were promising. If the extraction process could be efficient, then Krypton could stop the exploitation of the planet's core. Sirian's involvement in this project allowed him to access the lab on the moon of Krypton named Corin. The moon base was damaged heavily in the last civil war and was now depopulated. Only a research facility, which was mostly automated, was left in the base. This access to the moon base allowed Sirian to access a ship. Unfortunately, the ship was not equipped with a phantom drive, and other Kryptonian scientists were nearby with a whole platoon of military guards. But fate gave him an opportunity through Lar-El. Jor-El's wife was working on the same energy project with him, and that was an opportunity he used to his advantage. He kept a keen eye on Laura, and being close to Jor, he was on good terms with his wife. When Laura suddenly decided to quit the project, she knew the jig was up. That's how he found himself before the house of the El family. Well, not all Els lived here. Jor and Laura indeed called this tower their home. As Sirian stepped out of his hover car on the landing platform of the tower, the doors opened to reveal Jor. Usually, Jor would never greet guests as it was Laura, the more social of the two, and that alone confirmed his suspicions. Sirian. What a pleasant surprise. Jor greeted with a forced smile. It's nice to see you as well, Jor, and don't try very hard to smile. It doesn't suit you. His joke just floored the scientist, and Jor laughed awkwardly. I was curious about why Lara would suddenly quit the project. We were making stellar progress, and then she suddenly stopped one day, said Sirian, and then he conspiratorially leaned closer. Has the core destabilized already? Is there no hope left? Having worked closely with Jor-El has had its perks. Sirian knew what was going on with Krypton, so he had some leeway with the lab and its facilities. He was also watching the core, which had yet to destabilize completely, but it was only a matter of time. Krypton had never seen such a phenomenon, and an exact timeframe was hard to predict. Not yet, but as you know, anything can happen. The council has refused even to stop the mining despite my best efforts. All I could get out of the last meeting was for the matter to be considered as an issue. The council will deliberate on my findings and decide sometime later. You and I both know that is not useful. We are all dead anyway. Have you suggested an evacuation procedure? I did, but they immediately shot that down. The council is extremely concerned that it will only cause mass hysteria and has asked me to never speak of this again. Those fools will sentence this planet to ruin while they debate endlessly. We need to ensure at least something survives of Krypton. Perhaps we can send some children out into one of the colonies or a distant planet without the council's knowledge. Sirian's suggestion took Jor by surprise. You are suggesting that we betray the trust of the council. We will be committing treason and heresy, Jor warned, but Sirian could see Jor was not bothered by his supposed treason. The Council exists for the betterment of all of Krypton, but we both know that Krypton will die. Is it not our duty to salvage something from Krypton? We can't save everyone without the Council's cooperation, but we can at least ensure some children live through the disaster. Perhaps they will be able to give our race a fresh beginning. Jor was silent for some time, carefully watching Sirian, and then seemed to let out a sigh. Come inside. We have a lot of things to discuss. Jor invited him inside, and history changed for better or worse, none of them knew. After that conversation, Sirian was filled in about Lara's pregnancy and agreed to help them transport their son off-world. The next few months were dedicated to working out a new phantom drive that could open the hyperspace channel even under the influence of Krypton's gravity. The modified drive also requires a longer range to escape any pursuers and for quick access to the destination. With Sirian having access to Jor's plans, he built a modified phantom drive on his own, which he planned to install on the ship docked at the moon base. For months, they planned and plotted while Laura carried the baby. Sirian had to work day and night for the chance to make his escape along with Kal-El. Every day that he worked on the moon base was a risk. Sirian knew that he was a dead man if there was a whiff of treason from his side. The military was getting restless, especially with General Zod creating a ruckus against the Council. All the higher echelons of various guilds knew what was happening with Krypton. The signs have started to become very visible for the Council to dismiss them. Most of the water bodies on the planet were getting heated up rapidly. Most volcanoes were beginning to go active one by one across the planet. The seawater was getting desalinated rapidly, and all aquatic creatures were dying due to rapid climate change. Thunderstorms were now abundant on the planet, causing enormous destruction to remote settlements. Only the energy shields around major cities like Kandor have proved effective against thunderstorms. But such measures were only going to be effective for the time being. It was only a matter of time before even the most advanced cities of Krypton would suffer under the wrath of the planet. Sirian was working on some of the firewalls when he received a message from Jor. The flower has been delivered safely. It is Class M. Laura wants a child, and we plan to name the child Kal-El. The message translated to the delivery was successful. The child was male. They have also named the child Kal-El. So he quickly replied, knowing that time was at stake and they had many preparations to see through. Congratulations. The procedure is ready to be enacted. Minutes after Sirian's message was read, Jor called back all personnel from the moon base except for a few guards and Sirian himself. Sirian took control of the moon base and then shut down the gravity wells around Krypton. He didn't have to deactivate every gravity well but just those close to the moon. Jor would initiate the launch and trace a path for the launch vehicle straight for the moon. Sirian will have to take care of the guards after Jor gives the signal, so he starts preparing. Sirian watched as the ship returned after transporting all of his colleagues. Now, almost 20 guards were left in the base, and he knew just how to take care of them. But the coup had yet to start, and Jor had not given him the signal. So, Sirian used this time to make his own preparations. He took the command key that would override the base's security systems and inserted it into the prime slot. For a brief moment, the security alarms blared in the base before everything returned to normal. This is Sirian Vex speaking. Please don't panic. This malfunction is the product of a new command key designed for this experimental procedure. For the duration of this experiment, no one is allowed to leave the base under any circumstances. Please maintain your positions and cooperate. Thank you. With that part of the plan over, he directed the droids to replace the ship's phantom drive with the modified drive. While this was happening, he began to set some explosives and poison gases around the base. The antimatter chamber would be sealed with him staying inside, and when the time was right, he would take care of the facility's armed guards. For hours, he waited, all the while hacking into the generators powering the gravity wells close to the moon. Then, all of a sudden, Jor's voice came through the comms. "Sirian. Are you there? Can you hear me?" "I can hear you, Jor. What's happened? Why are you delaying the launch?" Sirian asked as the time that they had planned was passing. "I was held up by Zod. The general has launched his coup. I am on my way to the tower, but a full civil war is being fought here. Are you ready up there?" "I am ready. On your signal, I can deactivate the gravity wells. What about other orbital forces?" "I doubt they can intercept the launch, especially with the civil war. I am already getting reports of the fleet descending into the planet. Even if they decide to interfere, I have some other contingencies in place. We owe you, Sirian. Thank you for everything. Thank me after the plan succeeds. Launch Cal to space, Jor, and leave the rest to me. May the light of Rao be with you." Sirian cut the connection and initiated the program to clean up the lab. Initiate strike protocol. Command key accepted. Initiating strike protocol. The holographic image of the lab flashed into existence, and several yellow spots in the image began to pulse, signaling the start of poisonous gas infusing into the breathing air. While this occurred, Sirian began to gear up with a rebreather and battle suit. He loaded his gun and adjusted the settings to kill mode. He could stun any stranger, but what was the point? All of them were going to die anyway, and he didn't need some fool to wake up from a stun gun and foil all his plans. Initiate Project Wisdom and stand by for Project Dismantle. Initiating. Project Wisdom was the protocol to hack into the archives of Krypton and store specific data regarding technology and military secrets in a separate databank on the ship. Project Dismantle, on the other hand, was designed to secure Kal-El's escape. With the lab under his command key, he set out of the lab's secure vault straight for his ship. He carefully navigated the tunnels of the lab, ensuring that there was no life signature from any of the guards stationed at the facility. As he came across the final tunnel to the dockyard, he noticed his armband projecting 2 life signatures. They must have used a rebreather and escaped the effects of the poison gas. He took out a small metallic ball and quickly threw it into the tunnel straight at the 2 surviving guards. The ball flashed red and exploded, which was his cue. He threw himself into the tunnel and began firing his gun indiscriminately. Sirian shouldn't have bothered because the guards were already dead, as their rebreather was damaged in the explosion itself. With the path clear, he opened the tunnel doors and made his way to the ship. Thanks to the emergency lockdown he initiated, the ship's crew were also stuck in the lab, which made commandeering the ship all the easier. He sped towards the ship as fast as possible, taking a speeder from the dock. When he finally arrived near the ship, he saw all the drones loading the ship with supplies for the long trip. After ensuring all supplies were loaded into the ship, he occupied the command chair, waiting for Jor's signal. Weapons status. All weapons online. The drone that he had dubbed Optima reported diligently. Shield status. Shield at 100%. Status of the Phantom Drive. Fully operational. Looks like all there is left to do is to wait for Jor's signal, he thought. Suddenly, a pop-up barged into the main screen with Jor's face on it. "We are ready for the launch, Sirian." "Good. We are ready over here, Jor. Send in Cal and leave the rest to me. Do remember that we have only a half-hour window. After that, my position will be crawling with the Kryptonian fleet," said Sirian as he initiated the dismantle protocol. Jor just nodded before the screen abruptly cut off. Sirian increased the range of the ship's sensors, and he immediately noticed the launch of a ship from Krypton. "The gravity wells have been disabled, Lord Vex. Project Wisdom has also run its course," reported Optima. "Good. Looks like it is time for our escape as well," said Sirian as he received the command key containing Project Wisdom. He secured it inside his tactical belt before taking the ship out of the base and began to move steadily outside of the moon's gravitational pull. Lord Vex, several vessels are in pursuit of Kal-El, Optima reported. Well, we can't have that now, can we? Sirian muttered, as he needed Kal-El to be on Earth, or else the timeline would go to shit. Besides, his own escape depended on the absence of any enemy ships. Sirian gave full power to the ship's engines and took it straight to intercept the ships on Kal-El's tail. Within a few minutes, his ship sensors picked up signatures of 4 ships. Plot their course and engage battle mode. Immediately, Optima came through and began to project the course of the ships. He let the first one fly past him as it was the ship of Kal-El and then greeted the other 3 with a rain of fire. At the angle they were fighting, they had to depend entirely on virtual display because they were under the cover of Korin, one of the moons of Krypton. Sirian winced as his ship shook under enemy fire. Shields at 90%. Arm dismantler cannon. He ordered as he pulled his ship through evasive maneuvers. When the screen showed the cannon achieved 70% power, he fired the weapon in the general direction of the enemy ships. A bright silver light pierced through the vacuum of space and punched through 2 enemy ships in a blink. His naked eye could observe the bright explosions in the space before him. Kal-El has escaped from the Rao system, Lord Vex. Good. Now, let's make our move and join Little Kal, he said as he turned the ship around and blasted straight back. Engage the Phantom Drive. The gravity wells are being reactivated, Lord Vex. Their systems are rebooting. It seems there was a failsafe in the system. Optima warned, when will the Phantom Drive activate? Sirian asked in a panic. Not before the gravity wells are re-engaged. This Phantom Drive is a modified version. It can withstand the strain of gravity wells. He consoled himself even though he knew he had never tested the new drive in extreme gravity. Looks like I will just have to wing it. His ship violently shook as the gravity wells suddenly came online. A few minutes later, the Phantom Drive came online as well. Engage the Phantom Drive, he shouted in alarm as the gravitational intensity increased. He could hear the metal frames of his ship warp under the pressure. There was a flash of white light and a violent tug. He could listen to the warping of metal under the immense strain, and in a jiffy, he was airborne. All of a sudden, he felt as if he couldn't breathe, and his body felt like it was being squeezed through a narrow tube, and then he knew no more. January 1, 2000. Phil had worked closely with Nicholas Fury throughout his career in S.H.I.E.L.D. In those long years, he had never seen Nick Fury, now the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., being this anxious. His eyes traced the director, who anxiously paced back and forth in his office. Phil couldn't blame the man. Even though he was skittish, his director did it for both of them. Who wouldn't be skittish, especially when the director of NASA calls in and reports a space-time anomaly was detected close to Earth? Keep in mind that this call came right after celebrating the new year and the arrival of a new millennium. When S.H.I.E.L.D. was mobilized and all its firepower was focused on the sky, NASA reported the phenomenon was over. An alien object was floating aimlessly in space, spinning close to Earth. The director immediately called in some favors and locked out NASA from the entire process, and S.H.I.E.L.D. took over. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. did have some expertise in handling alien invasion, which was not much, but they were more qualified than any other agency. The director had the option to blow the object up, or he could capture the object and bring it back to Earth. The director chose to bring it to Earth, especially after their analysts pieced together that the object in question was an alien. That alone was enough for Director Fury to send a Quinjet and bring the dead alien back to the base. Just letting the corpse float around in space would be ripe for disaster. The body would inevitably be drawn into Earth's atmosphere, and who knows what would happen after that. There is also the distant possibility that some other space agencies of the world may also take notice, and if they do, then the knowledge that there were aliens around would only spark mass hysteria. The retrieval operation was named Blue Lotus, and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s best agents were in that Quinjet. Director Fury, do you copy? With that, the crew of Operation Blue Lotus broke the radio silence. Phil stood up from his seat, looked at the director calmly, and gave a nod of support. He watched his colleague/boss press the button on the communication device. Agent Hill, report. We have collected the package, sir. But you will not believe this. The alien is still alive. Both heartbeat and pulse are steady. Phil exchanged a look of surprise with the director. What kind of an alien entity can survive the vacuum of space? What should we do, sir? Phil noticed that the director was silent for a few minutes before he took a deep breath. Bring it in, Agent Hill. Your mission remains the same. Yes, sir. With that, the comms cut off, and there was radio silence again. The director sagged into his chair with a sigh. Interesting days are ahead of us, Coulson. The new millennia is off to a good start, said Fury with a shake of his head. At least we didn't have an alien invasion, sir. We might even benefit from a diplomatic exchange if the alien is friendly. He tried to lighten the mood. I don't have to tell you that in this line of business, we can't afford such luxury, said Fury. Prepare for the worst, and you won't be surprised. He said grimly, indeed. I want you on this right away, Coulson. You have direct oversight. Yes, sir. It was an hour since Syrian woke up, and he should have freaked out, but he managed to stay calm and focused. There was no point in freaking out at the moment. He supposed there was a lot of time for that to happen. He was conscious the moment he entered the planet's atmosphere. When he woke up, he found himself restrained and in a body bag. From that simple fact, he deduced that his ship might have broken apart, and somehow, he found himself on another planet. Thankfully, the planet was one with a yellow star for a sun because he could feel an unholy strength coursing through his body. Fortunately, he was still wearing the rebreather, shielding him from any sensory overload. He just continued to stay silent throughout the journey. It was on the ground that the play changed pace. The moment his rescuers unraveled the bag, they noticed that he had regained consciousness. Then there was the customary freakout by the humans, and he was glad he was in the custody of humans rather than any other alien species. There was nothing they could do that would harm him, so that was a relief unless they had kryptonite, which was not cool. The humans continued their freakout, and the military base they had taken him to blared with alarms. He calmly broke the restraints and stood on his own legs. He was immediately converged upon from all sides by gun-wielding soldiers, mounted machine guns, artillery, and tanks. Then, he took a good look around the military base. The weapons and vehicles used by the soldiers were more advanced than the norm of the 1970s or the 80s. Another curious fact was that the soldiers were not wearing their standard uniform but rather uniforms in black. They looked like special ops soldiers, and then there were several people dressed in tight bodysuits. The common factor in all these people was that they had a Silver Eagle logo on their uniforms. The only plausible explanation he could come up with was that either the phantom drive caused a time dilation field around him or Earth was truly advanced enough. But to honestly know what happened without giving himself away to his rescuers, he had to take a risky step. He again looked around the base and noticed it was in the middle of a desert. Nodding to himself, he deactivated the rebreather. The polymorphous glass shielding of his suit pulled back, and he was exposed to the air of Earth. He instinctively closed his eyes and breathed in Earth's rich, nourishing air. He could hear the soldiers scream out warnings and threats, but he didn't give a damn about what they were saying. Having lived on a ticking time bomb of a planet that was Krypton, he could truly appreciate the beauty of Earth. Krypton was just dying, and its air was polluted beyond anyone's imagination. A smile automatically blossomed on his face as he felt how thin the air was and how weak the gravity felt on Earth. In Krypton it felt like the planet was trying its hardest to ensure everything living in it felt its displeasure. Earth felt like a hot girl trying to woo you into staying with her for the rest of your life. Sirian's smile abruptly disappeared when his enhanced senses hit him. It felt like the world was bearing down upon him, and every sound on the entire planet was being shot into his brain like bullets. He could feel his hands shake and almost slip out of control, but his training kicked in. From the moment he had planned the escape out of Krypton, he was training to master his senses. It was one thing to train for something that was only a hypothetical scenario, but it was quite another to truly apply what he learned when the situation called for it. It took some time for him to truly suppress many of his senses and focus on his own body. He managed to wrestle his senses and suppress them back. The real problem was his hearing, because the sounds were very distracting and painful. Comparatively, his vision was more manageable. He took a deep breath and focused. He could feel that a force field was covering the entirety of his body. He would have genuinely liked to use what he assumed to be the tactile telekinesis field to fly away, but he suppressed that urge. Instead, he used the momentary respite and control over his super senses to use his enhanced vision. He could see through concrete and steel, and his reach extended all around the base suddenly. What he saw took his breath away and only added more questions. He saw the date on a digital clock, which was January 1st, 2000. The problem, however, was that he also saw several people that should frankly not exist in the DC universe. There was a guy in a black trench coat dressed up as a pirate with an eye patch and all. The guy looked like a carbon copy of Samuel L. Jackson, and the guy was observing everything from a bunker below the base through a video feed. Then, there was Clark Gregg dressed in a black suit. The guy was closing in on his position, and as if that was not weird enough, he could see that one of the astronauts on his rescue team was Kobe Smulders. That was a WTF moment that truly floored him, and he didn't know how to proceed. Frankly, he was ready to bolt straight into the sky and look for Kal-El. As the thought of making a quick escape passed through his head, Clark Gregg stepped forward and addressed him. "Hello, welcome to Earth. Can you understand me? Please nod once if you can understand what I am saying." Sirian nodded slowly as if he were unsure how to respond exactly. "Good. My name is Agent Phil Coulson." "Can we know your name?" the guy in the suit asked, which made Sirian freeze. "Agent Phil Coulson? Where the hell am I? Am I in some kind of weird DC Marvel mixed universe? WTF. He decided to file away that detail for later and concentrated on the here and now. "My name is Sirian Vex." "I apologize if I caused you any discomfort or alarm," said Sirian with a slight dip of his head. There was no loss in being a little bit courteous. He had practiced the British accent for blending in on Earth, and now it was just bleeding into his speech. "We fished you out from an orbit close to our planet. We had thought you to be dead. Can you explain how you found yourself close to our planet and how you survived space?" asked Coulson, who discreetly signaled the soldiers to lower their weapons. Sirian knew that every piece of information would be used against him at some point. Therefore, he decided to be as vague and believable as possible. "I once again apologize for having startled you and your people. My ship's phantom drive malfunctioned, and a space-time anomaly deposited me close to your planet. As for how I survived, it is quite obvious. The suit protected me." "I see. You look like a human, and you speak our language well. What exactly are you? How can you speak our language so well?" asked Coulson. Now, that was a tricky question. He could go with the route of Krypton using the same language, which would be a lie, and he would be caught red-handed. Earth itself has thousands of languages, so it stands to reason that other planets have different languages. So, he decided to go with a bit of a half-truth. "Our earliest ancestors have met before Agent Coulson. It must have been thousands of years before, when your people were less polished and developed. The language that you use is remarkably similar to what we use, although I don't know whether your written script is similar to that of Krypton." "Krypton? That's the name of your planet?" Yes. I am a Kryptonian from the system of Rao. Although it doesn't matter now. What do you mean? Krypton's core has been destabilizing recently. We have been trying to find a solution or even evacuate our people to the moon of our planet. We have failed, and now, by some fluke accident, I am halfway across the universe. I doubt there is anything left of Krypton except scattered rocks. That brought the mood down around them. Sirian could see that Coulson was thinking about how to proceed from there, and he waited patiently for the agent. Using his super senses, he heard the radio crackle to life in Coulson's ear, and it was Nick Fury's voice. Ask him about the ship he arrived here on. Ask him about whether there are other survivors. Are there any other survivors? Asked Coulson with a solemn face that would have fooled anyone into thinking he was a sympathetic guy. I hope so, but very unlikely. Our evacuation protocols were not yet enacted because Krypton's ruling council had yet to give the go-ahead. I see. You have my deepest condolences. What about your ship? If you were close to Earth's orbit, then surely your ship must be close too. We can help you recover the ship if it endured the travel. Coulson offered, but Sirian could see where this was going. They wanted the ship for any technologies or data it would hold. Again, this presented a dilemma. He could just allow them to scour space for any remains of the ship and hope that they never find anything. Doing that will make him indebted to S.H.I.E.L.D., and they will be dealing with him from a position of strength, especially if they find something. He blinked as an idea came to his mind. It was going to expose him somewhat, but it would nicely counterweight his position on Earth, especially with Fury watching this exchange. You don't have to worry, Agent Coulson. I will search for any remains of my ship myself. There is no need to waste your resources, said Sirian before he took a few steps back from Coulson, who looked on in confusion. He took a deep breath and bent his legs a little bit, and then, with a boom, he was away, flying into the air. He could feel the gravity of Earth trying to drag him down, but having lived in Krypton, Earth's gravity felt like a gentle tug. He could feel a force field covering his entire body, and suddenly, he punched through the air with no more barriers to hold him down. A sonic boom was left in his wake as his body cut through the air, completely overtaking the speed of sound. He was among the clouds, and it was just pure joy coursing through his mind. Ho-ho! He let out a whoop of joy as one of his greatest wishes came true. He has attained the ability for unaided flight. Wingsuit and base jumping can piss off, as the sky is now his oyster. The sun was setting slowly in the distance, and Coulson began to make his way to the special quarters that S.H.I.E.L.D. had assigned for their extraterrestrial guest. It has not been easy for most S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to stay in the base, knowing that they housed a being who possessed powers far beyond their imagination. The only one who was experienced in dealing with superpowered beings was Nick Fury. But the director had chosen to take a back seat and charged him to deal with their new guest. Sirian Vex represented a great opportunity or a great deal of calamity for Earth. It was Coulson's duty to properly vet him. Already, the threat level of Sirian had gone up after he demonstrated he could fly straight out of Earth's orbit well beyond Mach 9 speed with no external aid. From that single incident, it was easy to predict other possible powers of their guest. Super strength well beyond even the dreams of Captain America was a sure thing. All S.H.I.E.L.D. analysts were absolutely sure that there was nothing physical that could ever hurt Vex. If the guy could survive flying at speeds that even the most advanced rockets in NASA's arsenal could not, then the guy's strength was off the charts. Other projected abilities include enhanced senses, extreme resistance to basic elements, and super speed. Frankly, even the projected abilities were terrifying to behold, and he wondered just what other powers Vex possessed. It was imperative to assess what his intentions were, as he knew it was a bad idea to just ask the guy to get off their planet. Turning a corner, he found himself outside the door to the quarters assigned for Vex. He knocked on the door 3 times and stepped back a little bit. Mr. Vex. Can I come in? Please do come in, Agent Coulson. Coulson opened the door and let himself inside. "I see you have started working on the drone promptly," said Coulson as he moved closer to Syrian, who quickly finished what he was doing to properly greet Coulson. "The quicker I restore the drones, the quicker I can restore my ship or what's left of it." Coulson nodded in understanding. The director was not happy to learn that the wreckage of the alien ship was now safely tucked away inside a giant hole on the moon. The only thing that Vex brought back from the wreckage to Earth were several drones that he claimed would help speed up the ship's restoration. Unfortunately, the drones were in bad shape and needed some patchwork. "Anything that you need to speed up the process?" "Oh no. What you have provided so far is more than enough to restore the drones. The real challenge will be the ship itself," said Syrian as he sat opposite Coulson. "I gathered that, which is why this conversation is important. Director Fury has agreed to vouch for your asylum on Earth, but know that this will be a tough position to sell to our government. The last time a group of aliens visited us, they tried to bomb us back to the Stone Age with their fleet. Many among our government will be against helping you rebuild your ship. You need something in return for your aid, and it will keep you clear from your government's pressure." Vex said with a straight face. "Exactly." Coulson nodded, but he kept the truth in his mind. The government was not going to hear anything from S.H.I.E.L.D. The only ones who will be informed will be the President of the United States and the World Security Council. "Let's negotiate." That statement was followed by almost a 3-hour-long discussion. In the end, Coulson retreated back from Vex's quarters with a satisfied smile. He was careful to make his expression impassive when he handed over a detailed report to Director Fury regarding the finer points of the deal he made with Vex. "So he agrees to share his technology and aid us in developing our own in military, space, energy, manufacturing, cyber, and medical fields in return for asylum and material help in restoring his spaceship. He also promises to work with S.H.I.E.L.D. to defend Earth from any extraterrestrial threat so long as he is granted citizenship on Earth." "Those are some good terms," Fury commented as he read through the report. "I have catalogued all the technologies that Syrian has promised to provide in a separate document according to categories," said Coulson, and Fury acknowledged him with a nod. "What about the DNA sample as well as his consent for some tests?" asked Fury. "Denied the both of them. He is prohibited by his government from sharing DNA of himself or that of any Kryptonian with other races. That is a fundamental law on their planet. Kryptonians are also forbidden to procreate with other races in the universe. If he is the last Kryptonian, then how exactly does he think he can rebuild their race?" asked Fury. "I ask that, sir. According to Vex, Krypton has stopped having natural births for thousands of years. I have included that in a detailed report about Kryptonian history and how modern Krypton was shaped as a result." The Council will be disappointed at not getting a DNA sample. "But we have ways to collect that, don't we, Coulson?" "Already on it, sir. We will be sweeping his room for every scrap of samples." "Good. Have you gleaned any of his future plans?" asked Fury. "At the moment, he is concentrating on rebuilding the ship. After that, he wants to search the wreckage of his planet and search for any survivors." I will take this to the Council. "But I don't have to tell you to keep an eye on our guest," said Fury with his one-eyed stare. "You don't have to worry about that, sir. I've got it covered," said Coulson before getting ready to leave. Coulson. Halfway to the door, he paused and turned around. "Yes, sir. Have you thought of where he would stay for the duration of his stay?" "No, sir." "You better start thinking." "Will do, sir." March 15, 2000. "How is it looking out there, Optima?" Syrian asked as he floated close to the wreckage of his ship on the moon's surface. Many of the ship's thrusters, life support systems, landing gears, anti-gravity thrusters, and hull thrusters are all damaged. There are structural defects that will take almost a year to patch up. That timeframe may even be pushed back since we can't access a docking bay. Sirian let out a disappointed sigh at Optima's analysis. Just as he feared, it would take forever to rebuild the ship without a resourceful dockyard and a building bay. With the limited resources at his disposal, it was already going to take a year to restore all drones to working conditions. Then, there was the power source to consider. The Phantom drive had completely demolished the power source and engine. He would have had to build the entire thing from scratch, which was a huge problem. To power up the ship, he needed to reinstall the power source, which was better said than done. Kryptonian ships worked on enriched nuclear fuel, and he doubted S.H.I.E.L.D. was going to just hand over nuclear fuel to him. Besides, he didn't really want to depend on S.H.I.E.L.D. too much. If they realized that he was in desperate need of nuclear fuel, they would squeeze him out for everything he was worth. Of course, he could go full-on big bad alien way to get things done, but that would only create unnecessary enemies. Stealing uranium or plutonium was the next option, but that was a stupid idea. Every single intelligence agency in the world would be keeping an eye on nuclear fuel. A theft like that would only attract too much attention, and he won't ever be able to steal again. The third option was to mine uranium from asteroids, which was a waste of time. Even if he somehow managed to mine the bloody thing, he would still need to enrich and process the fuel, which he can't do on the moon. So that left the fourth and final option, which was to completely remove the power source and create a new one. Fortunately, he knew just where to get such a power source. It was also one of the reasons he chose to openly cooperate with the US government. It gave him easy access to their communication systems and access to a whole lot of valuable data legally. Do work on restoring those drones, Optima. I have some unfinished business on Earth. Having said that, he flew away from the moon straight to Earth. It took him 2 months to properly set up a power generating station on the moon using solar panels from old satellites and other space probes floating around in space. That was a temporary solution because sooner the drones would require large quantities of energy for longer hours of work. The immediate outer space of Earth was a junkyard filled with used-up rockets, old satellites, and other kinds of solid waste. But along with this junk, hundreds of working satellites spun around in fixed orbits. These satellites were the key to almost all information ever recorded in the history of the human race. For Sirian, it was a goldmine he needed to fulfill his needs. That's why he built a stealth drone on the moon and sent it barreling straight for a satellite owned by Stark Industries. While he could have taken anything he wanted from Earth itself without much fuss, using the satellite was a cleaner way. Also, he felt a bit queasy about stealing stuff using his own hands, like a common thief. His moral senses tingled less when he was using Optima to do his dark deeds. I'll have to look into that little mind block. It might not be a healthy way of living, Sirian thought. But desperate times called for desperate measures. He had thought of the pros and cons of this plan. The arc reactor was something that would be an answer to his energy problem. Now, he could have extracted that information from Anton Vanko in Russia. He suspected both father and son might be under surveillance by Russian intelligence agencies or even the CIA, and he was not going to underestimate humans like some cliché villain. He had come this far by careful planning and meticulous execution of those plans. He was not going to suddenly throw away years of vigilance just because he was in possession of superpowers. As the stealth drone slowly made its way towards the satellite of Stark Industries, he waited patiently at NASA's research facility in West Virginia. S.H.I.E.L.D. thought it'd be beneficial for NASA and S.H.I.E.L.D. to work on a new project. The project was to develop a Quinjet that worked on anti-gravity technology for propulsion. From what he understood so far, the U.S. Air Force and NASA had done several projects together to develop the same technology, but all ended in failure. Even Howard Stark, the resident genius who propelled the USA into the next millennium, failed in gravity manipulation. The man did manage to perfect maglev with the limited technology he had access to. All the humans lacked was an essential component to truly understand gravity, and with that, they would have mastered the last fundamental force of the physical universe. Many have tried in the past, Dr. Vex, but all of those attempts ended in failure. What makes you think that you can succeed? For that matter, why does S.H.I.E.L.D. think you can succeed? Asked Daniel Hoffman, the director of NASA. All previous attempts failed because of the lack of an essential component for understanding gravity and its effects on spacetime, said Sirian, facing the director and other scientists that NASA had called into the meeting room. Even a few among the S.H.I.E.L.D. research team were present in the room. While most of the S.H.I.E.L.D. team was filled with researchers, there was one glaring exception, and that was Maria Hill. She posed as a programmer/astrophysicist, but he knew that she was here to keep an eye on him. And what would that component be? Asked the director with some healthy skepticism. The guy had no idea that he was speaking to an alien. Negative mass. His answer garnered a scoff from the collective scientists in the room. Sirian noticed that the S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists refrained from doing that, and he deduced they were in the know of his origins. Negative mass is an impossibility, Dr. Vex. Only according to Einstein, but according to me, it is possible. And we should believe you because negative mass can be created if one can master electron compression. You don't have to take my word for it. I can prove it to you, said Sirian before he placed a small box on the table. Opening the box, he took out a small black disk the size of his palm. He activated its energy core, and the disk floated harmlessly in the air, to everyone's shock. As you can see, this small disk can defy the gravity of Earth. Now, while it is simple to defy Earth's gravity, it is quite another thing to control propulsion through anti-gravity technology. I am, of course, talking about vessels inside the Earth's atmosphere. It will get more complicated once outside of Earth's atmosphere. It was not considerably complicated to make anti-grav thrusters that can function in outer space, but he didn't say anything of that sort to the crowd before him. He didn't want S.H.I.E.L.D. and, in lieu of it, Hydra to gain space superiority until he had properly come up with a plan to deal with the Nazis hiding in plain sight. He needed a plan to smoke them out and destroy them. But he was also mindful of the local politics involved on Earth. The balance of power was currently enforced through nukes. He didn't want any new tech to radically change that status quo because of his actions. So, his plan was to string them along for as long as possible until he came up with a viable plan to ensure his tech didn't fall into the wrong hands. How did you? Why haven't we heard of you before? Asked a completely flummoxed director of NASA. Probably because of S.H.I.E.L.D. Sirian just shrugged. Let them come to their own conclusions. He began to distribute the written paper on electron compression and how to synthesize the negative mass in the physical plane. It was a long explanation, and he had to study all the technical terms used on Earth to properly present the paper, but in the end, the project got full permission and funding. The project would start within the next 2 months. A new crew of engineers had to be allowed, and then the necessary equipment had to be procured. After 2 months, he was going to be locked inside the facility. So, he guessed that he had 2 months to procure the arc reactor technology. The ride back to his apartment went without any major incident. The only complaint he had was the companion he was forced to take the ride with. What mode of transportation do you use in Krypton, Dr. Vex? Maria Hill asked as she drove the car through Henry Street in Willowdale. The woman was a sponge and gathered intelligence using whatever means necessary. So, he had his game face up and never gave anything substantial away. They are mostly speeders used by the common people. If you are rich, then there are advanced hovercrafts that are basically spaceships, but they will not be able to go beyond the planet's atmosphere. Why use other modes of transportation if you can fly? Agent Hill asked curiously. That question from Agent Hill was a tricky one. He had not yet explained that his powers only worked in the presence of a yellow sun, and he never will. He was not foolish enough to give S.H.I.E.L.D. or mankind information regarding his powers. We had several restrictions on using our powers. Not everyone is skilled enough to fly around on our planet. Krypton's gravity was much stronger than that of Earth. This also factored into the increased reliance on vehicles for transportation. I see. Agent Hill hummed as she turned the car around a corner and slowed down before stopping before an 8-storied building. Well, my stop has arrived. Would you like a cup of tea? He offered as he stepped out of the car into the street. Some other time, call me if you need anything, Dr. Vex. I will, and thank you for the ride, Miss Hill. Call me Maria. Then I insist that you call me Syrian. See you soon, Syrian. Take care of yourself, said Maria as she shook hands with him and then drove off. Syrian got to admit the woman was a good spy. The entire conversation felt normal, which was sort of what the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent was angling for. He fastened his side bag on his shoulder and slowly made his way inside the building. Back in early, Mr. Vex, the security guard asked as he held open the door for him. It's not early enough to see my favorite TV show, George. He joked lightly, but as he stepped into the lobby, it was filled with couches, cardboard boxes, some light furniture, and numerous appliances. What is this, George? He asked in surprise. You've got a new neighbor, Mr. Vex, said George, and that worried Syrian. That's great, he said as he made his way for the elevator. He worried that an agent was being drafted to keep a close watch on him. He knew that 2 agents were keeping an eye on him from across the street. S.H.I.E.L.D. had learned not to install monitoring devices in the building after he systematically destroyed them in the last 2 months of his stay. From then on, they had only kept an eye on him through the agents in the opposite building, which was a shame. He enjoyed the cat-and-mouse play and the hunt for monitoring devices. It had become a recreational activity for him. As he stepped out of the elevator on the 4th floor, he expected the Black Widow, Hawkeye, or some other agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Contrary to all his expectations, he was staring into Natalie Portman's face. The surprise only lasted for a few seconds before he regained his beatings. Hi. I am Jane Foster. I just moved in here. Are you by chance Syrian Vex? She asked with a bubbly persona. Nice to meet you, Miss Foster. I am Syrian. How do you know that I live here? He asked as he shook hands with her. It took a considerable amount of effort not to address her as Miss Portman. As a Star Wars fan, Natalie Portman was someone that he held in very high regard. My friend is Janet Cornell. She told me about you. Ah. The lady running the cafe a few blocks from here? Yes, Jane smiled brightly. She told me about you, and I needed an apartment close to my university. You study in Culver? He asked, and it was then that he remembered that Jane Foster was an alumnus of Culver University. Come to think of it, there are a lot of interesting individuals in Culver right now. He shook those thoughts away to listen properly to what Jane Foster was saying. I am studying under Eric Selvig. Of course, I know that you are an astrophysicist, she said with obvious excitement. How do you know that? He asked, flummoxed. He certainly had never divulged what his profession was to her or her friend in the cafe. Before moving here, my father looked up the people of this whole block. He is paranoid that way. Sorry, she looked a little bashful now. At least he could somewhat be less wary of Jane Foster. He was sure she was not here on S.H.I.E.L.D. business. She would make a shitty spy, but he was still on guard. I guess you are welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you. Good God, the woman had a beaming smile plastered on her face. If it weren't for his experience with dealing with this kind of shit, then he would have gone full fan crazy on her. That'd have been disastrous in so many ways, and that thought kept him anchored to reality. You need any help with those things down in the lobby? Syrian offered. Oh, no need. The guard outside offered his help. George is getting on in his years, Miss Foster. I think it would be better if I helped. Just wait a little bit. You can call me Jane. Okay, Jane. Call me Syrian, he smiled. Having made a new friend, he was in high spirits for the rest of the night. He left his bag inside his apartment and started to help move everything up into Jane Foster's apartment. When he returned to his apartment, Optima was waiting for him with all the data that he would need from the satellite. Just as he was about to activate Optima and study the data she gathered, the space before him warped, and what looked like see-through crystals suddenly began to form. Greetings to you, Mr. Vex. It has been many centuries since I've seen a celestial face-to-face. A voice spoke from his back, and he turned around to find a bald woman dressed in a golden silk robe. The only thing going through his mind was, oh shoot. The Ancient One lounged on a bright red couch. She wondered whether she could add a couch like this one to Kamar Taj. Truly, this couch was better than what she had back home. Some paintings would also not be remiss, as many masters had complained about a lack of colors in the sanctum. Tea, Syrian offered, and she took the drink with a customary thank you. You know, this is the only peaceful conversation that I have ever held with a celestial. Usually, it devolves into outright threats and then a full-blown fight, she said as she took a sip of the tea. She had to admit that she preferred her own tea, as this one did not meet her taste buds' expectations. You repeatedly call me a celestial, but I am not one. My race is known as KRYPTONIAN. Truly, she raised an eyebrow. The fact that the time stone was not at all able to predict Syrian's future was clue enough that the being sitting in front of her was a celestial, or at least on par with a celestial. Yes. I am sorry to say that your lies will do you no good with me. You may fool the humans, but I happen to know that there is no Krypton in this vast cosmos. She was alerted to the moment when a powerful presence was brought inside Earth's atmosphere. The only reason the shields projected by the sanctums allowed Syrian entry was because humans were the ones to bring him to Earth. The magical shield that enveloped the Earth was specifically designed to keep the prime bodies of celestials out of Earth. There are ways around the shielding, but she had plugged those gaps after one celestial managed to breach through the shield some 20 years ago. I am telling you no lie. You just assumed that Krypton was a planet in your universe. I never said that I am from your universe. Now, that piqued her interest. Are you claiming to be from another universe? She asked with a healthy dose of skepticism. Yes, and before you ask, most of the people in that universe do not exist here. It took me some time to put that together properly. Now, that was unexpected but not the strangest thing she had heard in her lifetime. Please do elaborate, she prodded. Most of the people here have a very different profession and names. For example, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. was an actor on Earth. The same is true for Jane Foster, who has moved in recently across the hall. Even your alter ego was an actor on the Earth I knew. In my home universe, there was no Captain America or super soldiers in general. There was an intergalactic policing force called Green Lanterns in my home universe, but here, nothing of that sort exists. There are a trillion other differences between our worlds, and I have not even scratched the surface. I see. So, you are an outer being like Dormammu, she muttered to herself with a perplexed look. Who? Asked Syrian with a baffled look. Dormammu is an outer being like yourself. This explains why you have been absorbing the life energy of the universe like a sponge, she explained patiently as her mind raced with thoughts. I did what now? What are you talking about? He asked in surprise. Oh, dear. You have no idea what you have been doing all this time? She was now genuinely shocked, and that happened rarely. I flew around a little bit, and I did some corporate theft. Other than that, I've never done anything that could threaten this planet. She couldn't find any lies, and the Syrian looked honest enough. Now, what to do? The Ancient One frowned thoughtfully at the alien being before her. What do you know of magic or dimensional energies? She asked, leaning forward with a sense of urgency. Next to nothing other than the fact that they are supposed to be a fundamental force that governs the universe. If you know nothing of magic or dimensional energies in general, Then how are you absorbing the humongous energies at a rate that even baffles an experienced celestial? She asked in surprise. My powers come from absorbing the yellow sun's radiation impinging on this planet. Kryptonian genes absorb any and all radiation, especially gamma radiation. I am afraid you are not just absorbing radiation from the sun. You are absorbing a huge amount of dimensional energy. This universe has an abundance of varying energies because of the unique way it took birth. These energies have already made a wide variety of changes in your body. I think you have not noticed this till now because your body has yet to reach its limit in absorbing these energies, she explained patiently. What changes? Syrian asked with a flummoxed expression. Your cells are no longer dying out, Mr. Vex. It is one of the prime reasons that S.H.I.E.L.D. has yet to procure a dead cell from your bed sheets or garbage. Essentially, your body has become immune to time. Agent Coulson, report. Sir, we have not been able to procure a DNA sample, much less a hair or a cell, from Mr. Vex, said Coulson in a calm voice, even if he was on the business end of Fury's stare. 3 months and not a single sample from our alien guest? Fury asked incredulously. Yes, sir. We do have Hill on the field, right? Yes, sir. Coulson nodded. And yet we haven't got a single genetic sample from our guest. Why? We have accessed all his personal belongings, clothes, watch, bed sheets, carpet, and even the garbage, but we have not found any traces of genetic samples. Our best possible guess is that he cleans up neatly or there is nothing to clean up, said Coulson, pursing his lips. Do elaborate, Coulson, said Fury with some confusion. Several of our analysts believe that Mr. Vex simply does not age like normal humans. Another group is of the opinion that he does not age at all. So, you are telling me that we have an immortal alien amongst us? Fury asked in disbelief. Not exactly, sir. It is entirely possible that this is due to Mr. Vex's physiology. He has not at all shared anything about Kryptonian genetics with us. Coulson reminded his boss. For a time, Fury remained silent, looking thoughtfully at the table in his room while drumming his fingers against the hardwood surface. What do you think about him? Fury asked finally. Every psych profile we have of Mr. Vex puts him as friendly. Agent Hill also speaks favorably of him. What else does she have to say about him? Asked Fury. He does not mix well with large crowds. She thinks he is physically restraining himself to behave in a certain way to blend in, said Coulson before he hastily added, this was something our analysts predicted, as extraterrestrial lifeforms may have a different relationship with time than humans. Do you think it was a bad idea to throw him out into the open? Asked Fury as he scrolled through the images taken by the agents assigned to keep an eye on Syrian. Locking him up in our base would have been counterproductive. There was a significant chance that he would have turned hostile at some point. We did clock him as friendly in our initial assessment. Having him operate in the open has done some good to him, and we did collect a ton of data without pissing off a superpowered alien, said Coulson with a shrug. I would say the risks were there but very minimal, and the decision was a sound one. Anyway, it seems to work out in the end. Coulson nodded at a picture of Syrian with a woman in a cafe. Who am I looking at? Asked Fury. That would be Jane Foster, sir. She is a research fellow in Culver. Their relationship? They are neighbors, as Miss Foster lives opposite Mr. Vex's room. As far as we know, they are friends. Keep an eye on them. Will do, sir. Coulson nodded before he hesitated. Fury didn't miss the look that passed through Coulson's face. Come off it, Coulson. Sir, shouldn't we have asked him about the Kree, Skrulls, or any other extraterrestrial civilizations out there? Asked Coulson. After all, any intel on alien civilizations were a goldmine, and if it could be delivered freely all the better. I don't want to spook him. Besides, we don't know whether Krypton has any standing alliances with the Kree. If they do, then I don't want any possible blowback affecting us in any way. We just found someone with similar powers to Carol Danvers, and I would like to build some trust with our guest," said Fury, leaning back into his seat and casting a speculative eye on the image of Syrian Vex and Jane Foster. "Let him roam the earth under our watch and let things progress organically. Sooner or later, he will develop attachments on our planet, and we will exploit them for the safety and security of this planet." "Sir, there is also another potential problem," said Coulson, which made Fury raise an eyebrow in interest. "We have been monitoring the status of Mr. Vex's ship using our satellites orbiting the moon. There is a distinct possibility that other space agencies will pick up the ship's location, especially with all the solar panels clustering around the ship's general location," said Coulson. "That is not good," Fury said with a sigh. "We cannot exactly transport the ship into our atmosphere. We do not have a spacecraft capable of doing such a thing, and even if it were possible, there would be security risks. A space mission of that scale will not go unnoticed. What do we do, sir? If anyone gets an idea of what's going on, then the situation will spin out of our control," said Coulson. Fury stood up from his seat and stared at the bright sky outside. The sun was about to go out, but the sky remained as bright as it could be. A few minutes later, he made a decision. "Clear my schedule on Friday. I think it's time that I pay a visit to our alien friend." "How am I doing?" asked Syrian, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his apartment with his eyes closed. "You are doing very well, Syrian. Your energy output is steady, but it could be better. Now, slowly open your eyes and see for yourself," said the Ancient One. Syrian did exactly that, and he saw that a bubble of energy was surrounding him. The bubble was silver-white on the outside, but he could actually feel the energy that was now thrumming in his veins. "You are doing good, Syrian. Now, concentrate and absorb back the energy into your body." He did as the Ancient One suggested and folded the energy bubble into himself. When the process was complete, he was on his feet and did a fist pump. Yes. He was mindful of his actions, as he didn't want to accidentally blow the upper levels of the building. "There is a long way yet to go, but for the moment, this is an improvement," said the Ancient One, snapping her fingers to dismiss the mirror dimension. "But I am improving, right?" "Indeed," she nodded. "You've managed to exert some control over the energy inside your body. But our task is to control the energy intake into your body, which is easier said than done. The time dilation field has disenchanted one of the most essential links between your soul and body. I have seen this happen, and it will take time for your body to sync with the energy you now wield. I will get there eventually. After all, we have only practiced this for a week and that too in your presence," said Syrian before sinking into a couch with a bottle of beer in his hand. He had noticed some subtle aging on his body and had assumed it was the result of his exposure to yellow sun radiation or a time dilation field. It was the Ancient One that confirmed the time dilation theory. He had no reason to disbelieve her, as she would be the foremost expert on anything related to time. His eyes scanned for the time stone on her person, but he came up empty. "Speaking of which, how is your Sanskrit learning?" asked the Ancient One as she sat opposite him on a couch, breaking him out of his thoughts. "It's coming along well, though I don't have much time to spare," Syrian admitted. "But I am trying my best with the time I have. It is not exactly an easy language to learn on the fly." That's good. You will have to spend some time in Kamar Taj. There is a limit to which I can teach you if you are on this side of the globe. I will have to cut into the time of my work on the ship. Not to mention, S.H.I.E.L.D. will notice that I am missing from the crash site. I don't want to alarm them even more without due cause. Don't you worry. An opportunity will present itself soon enough. Do train with the sling ring, Syrian. I've got a feeling that you'll be needing it shortly." Having said her piece, the Ancient One stood up from the couch and created a portal in a jiffy. "What do you mean by that?" Syrian asked with a frown as he, too, stood up. "You'll see. The Ancient One said with a smile before her eyes flickered to the door. Answer your door. Before he could ask what that meant, the Ancient One stepped into the portal, which closed up in a jiffy. For a short moment, he stared blankly at the space where the portal was before a knock on the door distracted him. Making sure there was nothing out of the ordinary in his room, he opened the door, only to let out an internal sigh of relief as his late-night guest turned out to be Jane Foster. Only 2 weeks had passed since Jane Foster moved into the apartment across from his own. In that short time, a tentative friendship had blossomed between them. Do you know what time it is? Jane asked with a cross look on her face. Her raven hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She was wearing a white hoodie over a white round-neck shirt with black jeans. It looked as if she were dressed to go out, which she usually doesn't do often at night. That was all he could let out as his brain short-circuited for a moment. It's 7:15. Did you forget that today was takeout night? Asked Jane, and it was then that everything clicked into clarity for him. Ah, I simply forgot about that. Just let me get my jacket. He hurried back into his bedroom and plucked a jacket out of his closet. A few minutes later, he was walking beside Jane through the street on the way to a nearby restaurant. How come you forgot this was the takeout night? Asked Jane. Contrary to your belief, I do have to work during the day. I was simply busy with some work and forgot. Oh. It must have been interesting stuff if you forgot the takeout? Asked Jane innocently. Syrian hummed noncommittally. There are a lot of works being done on string theory. Is there? He asked absently as they crossed a road. Maybe supersymmetry? Jane fished unabashedly. I see what you are doing. What? She asked innocently. You are trying to find out what I am working on. Syrian accused her with a flat stare. Hey, you can't blame a girl for being curious, defended Jane. Have you ever heard the saying curiosity killed the cat? Asked Syrian just before they reached the restaurant and held out the door for Jane. Only in passing, said Jane before hopping inside. Figures, he mumbled before following her inside. He took a seat across from Jane at their usual table. So, what are you having today? Jane asked as she browsed the menu provided by the waitress. I wanted to try Thai food. He browsed through the dishes until, finally, his eyes struck gold. I think I will have Panang curry. Truly. Have you ever had Thai food before? Asked Jane with a look of concentration as she went through the menu. Once or twice. You? Never tried any so far. Is it any good? Asked Jane. Trust me, you will love it. He said, with a thumbs up. What the hell? I might as well try this one. Panang curry, was it? Eventually, both of them ordered the dish and tucked in. Jane moaned. It tastes good. Far better than the horrible thing you cooked in your kitchen, right? Syrian asked with a grin. I seem to remember that you were not much better, said Jane, waving her fork threateningly, not at all happy to be reminded of her failed attempt at cooking. I am just out of practice. Give me 1 month, and I will surprise you, he challenged. How about a bet? Asked Jane. The stakes? He leaned forward in interest. April 30th will be the deadline. You learn to cook within that time, and if you impress me, I will give you. Jane thought hard but couldn't come up with anything. Give me a personal tour of your college, especially your lab. And I'll get access to your research notes, he said with a victorious grin. Hey, that's too much. She trailed off as an idea came to her mind. A smile blossomed on her face as she realized she could turn this around. All right, I will give you a tour of the college and access to my lab. My research notes are off the table, but I can agree to unrestricted access to my research under several conditions. Name them. Syrian steepled his fingers and looked interested. You have to impress me with your cooking, which is a given. Jane ticked off one of her fingers. All right, Syrian agreed. You have to tell me where you work right now, and when I win the bet, you have to tell me all about exactly what you are working on. Deal? She offered her hand, which he shook after thinking things through. That's awfully skewed in your favor, but since I already know where you hang your coat, I'm game. Syrian said after a brief moment of thought. You have a deal, Jane. So, tell me, exactly where do you work? Asked Jane. It's been bugging me for a long time. Syrian merely fished his ID card from the pocket of his jeans and slid it across the table. He did enjoy Jane's wide-eyed, open-mouthed expression, which, if nothing else, made his day. Before he could tease her, his phone rang. Knowing that only very few people knew his number, he deduced this was a call that demanded immediate attention. Hello. We haven't met yet, but I would like to meet you. Just turn your head to the left. A sharp voice spoke from the phone. Version turned his head to the left, and sure enough, there was a black dude in a full dark emo pirate theme standing outside in the street. I am Nicholas Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. We need to talk. April 6, 2000. Concentrate and sharpen your energy a bit more. Syrian did as he was told. He pushed in more energy to increase the density step by step. Contrary to his wishes, a tidal wave of energy rushed out through his palms, breaking the structural integrity of the energy construct. You seem to be a bit distracted today. What happened? Asked the Ancient One, who was overseeing his training to control the energy flow within his body. It was an uphill battle to take control of his energy, but the Ancient One was a patient teacher even though he was not a patient student. He let out a sigh and took a seat on the floor of his apartment. I just had a conversation with Nick Fury a few days back. I gather it didn't go well, commented the Ancient One with an understanding nod. Oh, you have no idea. Syrian muttered as he thought of that conversation. So, how has Earth been treating you? Asked Fury. Syrian looked at the leader of one of the largest spy organizations on Earth from the corner of his eyes. Both of them were sitting on a side bench by the street across from the restaurant. He could see Jane was patiently waiting for him in the restaurant. The air is fresh, food is good, music is enjoyable, movies are good. And people? Asked Fury, smoothly cutting in. There are a lot of people, and I emphasize the lot, he said, as it was quite difficult to control his senses with so many people around. It was getting difficult to shut out the world and catch a few hours of sleep. Is that an issue? Asked Fury with an unreadable stare. No. It's just difficult to get used to, but I'll manage, said Syrian before directing a curious stare at the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. What brings you here, Director Fury? A situation has come up recently regarding your ship, said Fury, eyeing Syrian keenly. My ship? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes. It has been brought to my attention that there is a strong possibility that other space agencies of our planet may detect the presence of your ship. So you want me to move the ship away from the moon? Asked Syrian. Yeah. Is that doable? Asked Fury. Frankly, Syrian couldn't even entertain the thought of moving his ship anywhere. As of right now, his ship was just a pile of metal with minimal structural integrity. Moving it across space would undo all of the patchwork he had done till now. Not to mention he would have to move it piece by piece as the ship was in fragments. Then there is the matter of transportation. Just how exactly am I supposed to transport? A light bulb blinked to life in his head, and he subtly palmed the sling ring in his pants left pocket. Half the problem could be solved by using the sling ring, but there was still the matter of an exact location to secure his ship. In the end, he had no choice. It was in his interest to keep his ship's existence away from the general public. I can try, he found himself saying in the end. Good. If you need any help, don't hesitate to ask. You are in contact with Agent Coulson, aren't you? Of course. Syrian said, and he remained seated while Fury stood up. In that case, it's time for me to take my leave. Please keep us in the loop when you decide to move your ship from the moon, said Fury as he made his way to take his leave. Director Fury, we are not finished, said Sirian, hardly moving from his seated position. Sirian could hear Fury's increasing heart rate as the director turned towards him. You have something else to discuss? Asked Fury, smoothing out his face and looking curiously at him. Please sit, Director, said Sirian, and he patiently kept his silence until Fury sat back on the bench. I will not be keeping you appraised of my ship's location or its status anymore. But Sirian didn't give the man time to comment as he turned on him with a glare. He noted Fury was palming a gun inside his trench coat. Yeah, like that's gonna help, he thought with a mental scoff. When I first made contact with your organization, we made a pact. I would share my technology and expertise and help to advance the human race. I asked for very little in return, including the safety of Kryptonian genetics. You promised not to seek Kryptonian DNA, and you have been trying your best to secure it. You have violated an agreement made in good faith. Your actions will have consequences, Director Fury. I won't work with liars and thieves. You can expect unilateral adjustments in our agreement from my side as well. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Good day to you, Director Fury. Having said that, he promptly walked across the street, refusing to heed Nick Fury's calls. That's what happened. Was it necessary to antagonize the Director of S.H.I.E.L.D.? You have only made them see you more as a threat now, said the Ancient One. They were already seeing me as a threat. Besides, I needed to establish some ground rules in this alliance. I did give them most of what they asked. The least they could have done was to show a little respect to the agreement we signed in good faith. I would say it was an overreaction on your part. You could have handled it better, said the Ancient One. I probably could have, he admitted reluctantly. What has happened has happened. There is no point in overthinking it. Have you moved the ship yet? No. Sirian shook his head. I've not yet decided on a location. Speaking of which, I will be needing your help to move my ship. Oh really? I am no expert in using the sling ring. You saw how my energy constructs are. Any portal I create will lack cohesion. I would only damage my ship further if I tried to use the sling ring to transport it. Why exactly do you even need the ship? There is no point in searching for Krypton, as I promise you your planet does not exist in this cosmos. I believe you, but if I restore the ship, I can access the rest of the universe. There is a chance that I can find a decent planet to restart the Kryptonian race, he said, but the Ancient One merely shook her head. Are you sure that is a good idea? Asked the Ancient One. What do you mean? Sirian frowned at the Ancient One. You do know you are immortal, and I assume you are going to use Krypton's cloning technology to repopulate the universe with your race. What are you saying? The Ancient One let out a long-suffering sigh as she looked into her lap, gathering her thoughts. Just think about what you will unleash upon the universe if you clone yourself. The universe will be filled with beings that will absorb untold amounts of dimensional energies. The balance of the cosmos will fail with the existence of more Kryptonians. By attempting to raise Krypton, you will erase the rest of the universe, said the Ancient One. You can't be sure of that, he argued. I'm afraid I can. Now that you have taken the dimensional energies into your body, I can see your future more clearly. My future? Sirian blinked as he gave the woman a curious look. Well, bits and pieces of possible outcomes would be the correct answer. If you make clones based on your DNA, you will doom this reality to death. How? Sirian stared incredulously at the sorceress. I'm sure there are other immortal beings out there. Indeed. And how will they take it when a race of immortals that suck the very life force of the universe suddenly appears in large numbers? His eyes widened in realization. War, he said grimly. Power attracts more power, and he could see why the Ancient One was showing him. But at the same time, stopping the progression of his race didn't sit well with him either. War, the Ancient One agreed. But not just any war. It'll be a war that will shred even the tiniest of atoms. This universe will simply cease to exist. Now, that had to be hyperbole, but he didn't call her on that. Is that why you restrict my knowledge about the mystic arts? He asked instead. To an extent, yes, the Ancient One nodded serenely. I cannot predict how you or any of your future descendants will turn out. If you turn against this reality, then an adequate defense against you must be mounted. The Order of Mystic Arts was formed to defend this reality against beings like yourself. It will be counterproductive to our efforts to teach you our secrets, and at the same time, it would be remiss to leave you uninformed. But I don't intend to be a threat to humanity. For now. Can you give an absolute guarantee that you won't become an enemy of humanity? Even the minute possibility of you turning against humanity is a chance that we can't ignore. The same can be said about S.H.I.E.L.D.'s actions. So you are defending their actions now? Sirian couldn't help but feel like he made a blunder in coming to Earth, or at least making himself accessible to many of Earth's inhabitants. No, Sirian, she said patiently, I am merely giving you a little bit of insight lest you come to hasty conclusions. Try to see things from other perspectives. For a moment, the two of them remained silent. He believed that the Ancient One was being somewhat paranoid, but he understood where she was coming from. That didn't mean he had to like it. This, more than anything, made him realize that he had to find alternate lodgings. No matter what, his efforts to blend in with humanity were not going to work. Sooner or later, he would get exposed, and a lot of people would see a threat in him. It was natural to feel fear, but there was a chance that it could truly make humanity unreasonable. He remembered the whole mutant scare in the MCU, but thankfully, he had heard no tale of mutants so far. I suppose I can understand why S.H.I.E.L.D. did what it did, and your reasons are somewhat valid, of course, he admitted reluctantly. If he encountered another species, he certainly would have been looking into ways of studying a new alien form. Therefore, he could understand where S.H.I.E.L.D. was coming from. But they were not motivated by simply studying new life. If they got their hands on his DNA, they'd most likely go into super soldier research and create some monstrosity. He could not allow humans to weaponize his DNA or even stumble into a silver bullet of some kind that could take him out. I shall explain some of my reluctance to teach you at some other time. Now, you were saying something about your ship. I have to move the ship to somewhere safe. It has to be away from the moon, but I am at a loss. I thought about transporting it to Mars, but as you can guess, that is a long journey. I will have to drag the ship piece by piece approximately 200 million miles unless, of course, you lend a hand. Sirian watched the Ancient One mull it over for a short time. Why go for Mars when you can just keep your ship on Earth? She asked with a tilt of her head. I don't think anyone would be happy with that, Sirian said, taken aback by the advice he received from the immortal sorceress. Who's going to know? The Ancient One shrugged with an innocent smile. It only made him more confused. The Ancient One had only finished explaining how he was a threat, and now she wanted him to keep his ship on Earth, knowing full well that he'd be working to restore it. Bloody cryptic witches and sorcerers. I should have flown far away from Earth and never looked back. I have to say it is quite a beautiful sight, said the Ancient One as she looked at the Earth from the moon's surface. Sirian floated to her side, wearing an identical space suit. He had loaned one to the Ancient One. He didn't know whether there was any magical spell to survive space. If there was one, she didn't mention it to him. Don't be dramatic. I bet you've visited the moon before, he commented. You can't deny that it is a beauty, though. Just look. She pointed at the blue ball of a planet that was some 200,000 miles away. Taking a good look at the Earth himself, he had to admit it was a beauty like none other. No images could do justice to what he saw with his own eyes. He couldn't help but compare Earth and Krypton. Compared to Earth, Krypton was a waste dump. There was no beauty to Krypton, as green cover and oceans were very scarce there. The majority of the planet was covered with desert with little to no cloud or green cover. This left the skies bare for the sun to blare its full might on Krypton. The planet was resource-rich with exotic metals, but Earth was heavenly compared to Krypton. And to think trillions of life forms call that blue dot their home. It makes you very small, doesn't it? Asked the Ancient One with a nostalgic smile. He gave her a deadpan stare. I think we have some better things to do rather than oozing philosophy on the moon. You are right. Let's finish this quick enough, said the Ancient One before she waved her hands in a complex pattern. Sparks of dimensional energy escaped the Ancient One's palms, expanding across the surface of the moon in a bubble. Sirian could feel a slight tingle when the bubble enclosed a large section of space they occupied. Just something that will keep any activities here from prying eyes, the Ancient One explained. Sirian led the Ancient One down to the crater, where he stationed his ship. The further they moved into the hole, the visibility began to decline. Optima, give us lights, he ordered, and the drones working on the ship began to light up around the ship. That is a gigantic ship. Ancient One commented as they floated above the ship. She took out the sling ring and began to create a portal. Are you sure this is a good idea? Sirian asked. I am sure. Now, go to the other end and create a portal of your own. Maintain it for as long as possible, and I will do the rest. Heeding her advice, he flew to the opposite end and began to create a portal. Just as he suspected, it was a small portal prone to destabilization occasionally. The Ancient One, on the other hand, created a gigantic portal that dwarfed his own exponentially. The portal created by the Ancient One began to swallow the ship quite effortlessly. Branches of magical energy plunged into the portal he developed and began to forcibly expand. He just maintained the energy output the best as he could, and then, in an instant, the entire ship vanished before his eyes. Well, there you go. Now, come here. Let's go and see where your ship ended up, said the Ancient One as she dismissed the bubble of magical ward that had so far kept their activities from prying eyes and created a small portal. He stepped in first, followed by the Ancient One. On the other side of the portal, a vast area of forest greeted him. His eyes traced his ship by a beachhead, and as he used his enhanced vision around, he found that he was on an island surrounded by sea for miles. He could not see any land nearby. In fact, he could not see anything after a specific distance. It was as if his vision were being blocked somehow. We are near Huawei. This island once housed one of the oldest sanctums of our order. Now, it lies in ruins, but the island remains intact. Shielded from the outside world by some of the oldest protective spells, it can remain hidden from any prying eyes. This place is amazing, said Sirian as he took in the thriving wildlife on the island. Will this suffice? The Ancient One asked. This is perfect. Sirian looked around at the island with amazement before he turned his eyes on the Ancient One. How could I ever repay you? I will think of something when the time is right, she said before she ignited her thumb with a spark of energy and pressed it into his forehead. He felt a wave of energy pass through his body and settle in. He looked at her curiously, wanting to know what that was about. Now you can access the island whenever you please, the Ancient One said as a way of explanation. Oh yes. I can see it now, said Sirian as his vision penetrated the magical protection surrounding the island. So, now that you have a place to work on your ship, let's discuss the rent, said the Ancient One. There is a rent? He asked incredulously. I may belong to a mystical order that emphasizes spiritualism, but we have our expenses. So, let's talk about that rent. April 7, 2000. Director Fury, Secretary Pierce will see you now. Fury let out a sigh of relief at that before entering the office of his direct superior. While he remained the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., there still remained a higher authority than him. Many of the lower-tier agents would believe he answered directly to the World Security Council, but in between, there was one guy, Alexander Pierce. "Nick. Welcome to DC. What can I do for you?" asked Pierce as they shook hands in greeting. "What makes you think I am here for something?" asked Fury. "The fact that you found time to travel all the way to DC when you should be in California," said Pierce with a smile. "Take a seat, Nick. You would only be here if the situation demanded it. What can I do?" "I am here because of Project X," said Fury. He watched as Pierce froze for a moment before relaxing in his chair. "I take it that gathering the DNA of the subject didn't pan out," said Pierce after he stood up and took a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses from a nearby cabinet. Fury accepted the glass offered by Pierce with a nod and took a sip. "Didn't work out as well as I hoped, but we did gather valuable intelligence," he said. "That was always your primary intention. The DNA samples were a secondary objective for you, which I disagree with, but I do understand where you are coming from," Pierce said with a respectful nod, having known his subordinates' quirks. Fury always valued information. "Do go on, Director Fury." "As you already read from the initial report, Mr. Vex exhibits extraordinary physical powers similar to Carol Danvers. We can now confirm Mr. Vex has either superhearing or supervision or both. My bet is on both. I am not a betting man, and even if I were, I would not bet against you, Nick. So, what is the verdict?" Pierce said, leaning forward curiously, nursing his drink. "With our short-term plan to acquire a DNA sample at a dead end, we are switching to Plan B. I have sent in Coulson, and it may require some adjustments to the initial deal we made with Mr. Vex," said Fury, looking none too pleased to go on a fallback plan. "That is unfortunate but workable," Pierce mused, as they were prepared for just this scenario. They hoped it would not come to this, but he trusted Nick knew what he was doing. "Is there any possible retaliation on a wide scale from the subject? We did extensive research and psych profiling on Mr. Vex. According to our analysts, there won't be any violent episodes from him. I can assure you of that, Mr. Secretary." "Good. I will keep the council in the loop but keep the situation on the ground tight. I don't have to tell you that any leaks on this project will be catastrophic to you, me, the council, and our country." Pierce stared at Fury with a grave look. "I know, sir. We will keep the heat down in any event," Fury promised. "Good. Now, walk me through Plan B." Plan B calls for long-term benefits. We start with. After completing the brief, he was back on a plane to Sacramento. Pierce would keep the World Security Council appraised, and he trusted the man not to let politicians put their heads into S.H.I.E.L.D., especially considering the latest additions to the WSC. With the dissolution of the USSR, the WSC was expanded to include 2 more representatives from China and India. The arrival of new member countries into the WSC was frankly baffling to him. He was no politician, but even he was frankly baffled by this move. China's membership was a foregone conclusion, as they were nearly at superpower status. China was going to be a strategic ally in dealing with the remnants of fringe elements in the former USSR territories and North Korea. Their aid in Africa and the Middle East was also a strategic need of the day. They needed an outside player to broker deals that, in the end, would keep the lid on the region. He was somewhat baffled by India's admission, though. He would have thought a second ally from Asia would be Japan or even Pakistan. His experience told him that, somehow, geopolitics was shifting, and enemies were becoming fast allies. He ought to keep an eye on DC as well because S.H.I.E.L.D. was a circle of accountability. The WSC would keep an eye on him, and he would keep an eye on them. He would come around to doing that just as soon as the situation in Virginia came to a close. Syrian was hard at work designing some of the internal relays essential to miniaturizing the arc reactor. While there was no need for a miniature arc reactor, seeing as a big one was quite preferable for his ship, there were some significant applications he could see with miniaturized reactors. They could be an excellent backup for his ship, especially on shields and other life support systems. His venture into corporate espionage was a huge success, in part due to accessing the arc reactor technology as well as the hidden element in the Stark Expo model. For his own peace of mind, he decided to call the new element unobtainium. The new element was a tricky one to produce in the physical plane, but he was closing in on that objective. The only delay he was going to suffer was because he lacked a high density of energy to work with the particle accelerator. The device itself was already available to him, as it was one of the few things that remained intact within his ship. Sirian looked to his bedside, where one of his drones was working on something that was earning him quite a lot of money. When he enjoyed stellar success in hacking the Stark Industries satellite, he also decided to do some more digging. There were many shell companies and embezzlement going on, which was frankly disturbing. When this came to his notice, he decided to be a good Samaritan and steal from those who were committing the fraud. Frankly, having a multipurpose AI at his command and call helped him steal from some of the premier organized crime industries. The money that he looted from these red flag accounts passed through a variety of shell companies and even went through government holdings to finally sit securely in several dummy accounts just waiting to be used. The first set of rent for the Ancient One was paid out through one of these accounts. The money was wired to an account in Hong Kong, and thus, he rented an entire island for a year at an attractive price of $500,000. To his mind, that was a killer deal, considering the magical protections on the island. He did feel guilty for using what was most assuredly blood money or drug money. To alleviate this guilt, he decided to spend $1 million on charity. Splitting $1 million into 10 equal parts, he wired the money to 10 orphanages that were in dire need of funding through multiple accounts. He was sure he could do far more to help, but he knew that time for laying low was up. A lot of people were going to be angry when they found their money had disappeared, and he had no intention of rocking the boat this early in the game. He was also sure that SHIELD and other intelligence agencies might also be looking for the trail, but they would be jumping into the cyber black hole that he left in his wake. It was mighty easy to bug the entire net, and by the time agencies like SHIELD and the CIA caught up, they would get a nasty cyber cold, so to speak. The systems of this era were so easily prone to malware, and he had no second thoughts on exploiting that to Kingdom Come. To help set up cybersecurity, he was even planning on releasing open-source antivirus software soon enough. Frankly, a lack of competition in the cyber field was disturbing him for some reason. A knock on the door of his apartment distracted him from his work. A short scan of his eyes revealed that he had two visitors, Maria Hill and Phil Coulson. He had expected one of them to make contact with him but never expected the duo to visit him together. It would seem Fury was intent on damage control, which could only mean he has another plan running, one that is more subtle than the previous one. Shutting down all the drones and keeping Optima on standby, he opened the door. Agent Coulson and Maria, he nodded, acknowledging them both. Mr. Vex, greeted Coulson with a simple nod. Sirian. Can we come in? Asked Maria. Sure. Please do come in. He led them to the drawing room. As Coulson and Maria took their seats on a couch, he eyed them expectantly. Tea or coffee? He asked. Tea, said Maria. Coulson also chose the same. A few minutes later, he was sitting opposite the two agents, who were enjoying 2 cups of tea. First of all, please accept our sincerest apologies, Mr. Vex. Accepted, Agent Coulson, although I do warn you apologies will have no bearing whatsoever in this discussion, he flatly said, letting them know that he was serious in his position. You have to understand our perspective, Mr. Vex. As you already know, we have only come out of a near-nuclear catastrophe. We can't help but be suspicious of people of foreign origin, said Coulson. Sirian held back the urge to snort. Blaming the Cold War for humanity's suspicious nature was fast becoming out of fashion. I understand, which is why I did not bat an eye when I realized I was being watched by 2 of your agents from across the building. The only condition that I put forth when I agreed to share my knowledge with your agency was breached, and that will change our deal," he said firmly, not budging from his decision. "Very well then. What are your demands?" asked Coulson. "I agreed to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. as per the norms of the first deal. That will no longer be possible, and I will only work as a private contractor or a consultant, if you will," said Syrian. "I don't see a problem with that," said Coulson, and Maria Hill nodded along. "Good, and that means I decide which technologies will be shared with S.H.I.E.L.D. "Now, that's not the deal that we made," Maria objected. "I agree, which is why we are making the new deal," said Syrian before handing Maria a small card. "What's this?" she asked as she flipped over the card. "Vex Corporation. A new cybersecurity firm that I am starting. One thing I noticed is that you have laughable cybersecurity, and I believe there is a huge market just waiting for my expertise. You are going public? Are you insane?" asked Maria incredulously. "Hiding in plain sight is my motto, and insanity seems to be running high in your agency, Maria. You broke the deal we made in good faith, and now the new deal will be on my terms. Tell Fury that I don't like liars and cheats," said Syrian before standing up, having enough of the conversation. "If you go public, we won't be able to provide you with the necessary cover," warned Coulson as he stood up along with Maria. "You need me more than I need you, Agent Coulson. The first time I indulged your silly and frankly astronomical demands was because I hoped to build trust and a working relationship with mankind. Instead of working together in harmony, your masters got greedy. We could have been friends, but we will now be business partners," said Syrian before plucking a file from a nearby table and handing it over to Coulson. "What's this?" asked Coulson. "A copy of a contract that I propose between Vex Corp and S.H.I.E.L.D. for the exchange of anti-grav technology. I will be waiting for your response most eagerly," said Syrian as he held out the door for the 2 agents. "We will be in touch," said Coulson before stepping out, followed by Maria Hill. "Before you go, please pass this message to your director. Tell him that mankind has to learn to crawl before it prepares to run the marathon. Good day." Closing the door behind him, he returned to his work. He had been working on Vex Corp for a few weeks, and he had great designs for how it would progress. The primary reason he was starting the company was because he needed a front for purchasing some higher-grade steel and other necessary resources to speed up the work on his ship. To that end, he planned to expand from cybersecurity to other fields once the company broke even. Who knows, this might change in the future. But first, he had to complete the work on designing a modified arc reactor that would be suitable for his needs. April 15, 2000. Syrian stared at the device before him with a sense of achievement. The device in question was in the shape of a pentagon, with a white glass pane covering much of the device. His quest for creating a miniaturized arc reactor succeeded, though it was not without its hiccups. The success in completing the design and manufacturing of a miniaturized version deserved to be assigned to the wonder element unobtainium. Without studying that element, he wouldn't have had the foggiest clue about how to start building a miniaturized arc reactor. The element unobtainium facilitated stable and controlled nuclear fusion in an alarming manner that frankly boggled his mind. The wondrous property of this element doesn't stop there. It produces negligent heat, hardly detectable levels of radiation and an enormous surge of energy in a controlled manner. Frankly, it was a friendly element that was dancing around with a signboard saying, "Use me, I'm your friend." The element, once harvested in its raw form, was slightly volatile. But once it undergoes a refining process with slight exposure to a concentrated burst of antiprotons, it is safe as a puppy. While the raw form of unobtainium produced an energy density to run a submarine for half a decade or so, the enriched unobtainium could extend that to 20 years. Even the enrichment process could be improved by increasing the energy output of the unobtainium. Unfortunately, a higher grade of enriched unobtainium would be dangerous for the miniaturized arc reactor. So, it would be used in the reactor that was to be built for his ship, where he could install several safety measures. But that was far away in the future, as he had some extensive work to do on the ship before he could install the reactor. But what was bugging him right now was just how Tony Stark managed to work out a mini arc reactor in a cave with scraps from some missile components. There was also the question of how the hell Stark extracted energy from the palladium core. Off the top of his head, he gathered Stark, who must have figured out a way to capture a significant number of electrons to create gamma waves and high-energy electron flow to the rim of the reactor. This, in turn, causes an imbalance of protons and electrons, causing a massive surge in electrostatic potential. That said, this process could not be done in a 10 cm diameter device without cooling or controllers in the reactor. While palladium was an essential component in cold fusion, it doesn't explain how Tony Stark managed to circumvent some of the heavy equipment needed to make the reactor safe and sound. That really bugged him. But he was nothing but eager to explore alternate ways to synthesize the reactor. He made a note in his mind to explore alternate electrodes that could control the reaction within the reactor. He was sure he could come up with an answer. "Lord Vex, shall I insert the element into the reactor core?" asked Optima. "Yes, please," he nodded, returning from his thoughts. Optima plucked the mini arc reactor in his hand out using a readily formed metallic holder. In a similar manner, the unobtainium, which was under the care of a proton gun, was plucked away from its magnetic suspension casket. The element was inserted into the reactor core, and his arc reactor lit up with blue light. The element has been accepted by the reactor. Projected energy output not exceeding 10 GJ/s. Optima said serenely. "Nice." Sirian grinned as he leaned back in his seat, watching the reactor come to life happily. "Shall I modify the power grid to the new reactor, sir?" asked Optima. "Do so, and good job, Optima. I couldn't have done it without you," he said, patting his trusty drone to show his appreciation to the resident AI. "Incorrect statement, sir. You could have done this without me, given time." "Are you saying I am slow, Optima?" he asked, raising an amused brow at the drone. "You are slow selectively, sir," Optima said diplomatically. "That's a perfectly diplomatic way to insult me." "I'm impressed, Optima," he said, a snort of laughter escaping his lips. "Thank you, sir." He took in his temporary lab on his least Pacific island. It was not much of a lab per se, as he was holding his workshop in the broken remains of the old sanctum. The foundation was strong, but the structure had many faults, with overgrown trees and plants inside the structure. For Rao's sake, there was aquila growing right through the roof of the sanctum. It was going to be a lot of work to tear it all down and rebuild it, but he was going to do it in the near future. For now, he had managed to set up a hall for his temporary lab, and with the first arc reactor in hand, his need for a powerful energy source was solved. Of course, he had to make a few more arc reactors, but the drones wouldn't be dependent on the power of solar panels alone. Speaking of which, he had to take out all those panels and start working on them to see what he could do. The present solar panels of Earth were ridiculously expensive and had low energy yields. With Vex Corporation set to launch a product next year, possibly in July, he gathered electronics would be a good market to pursue. While he planned to venture into cybersecurity, he hoped to quietly slip into manufacturing and gain access to heavy machinery and metals like titanium, copper, tungsten, aluminum, steel, etc., in large quantities. To that end, he had been sending out feelers subtly searching for programmers. To attract the attention of some of the best programmers, he published the first open-sourced antivirus software on the web. From that single act, he gained a lot of friends and contacts as he got bombarded by a ton of emails. Frankly, it was as if a floodgate were opened, and he had to literally read a constant stream of messages every day. Some were congratulatory, some were job offers, some were frankly creepy, and some were intellectual conversations. The trouble was weeding out the wheat from the chaff until he decided to build software to do just that. Now, his emails were filtered and moderated separately so that he could easily access the useful ones. In doing so, he could interact with some of the best minds in the world. The process was still ongoing, and it would take some time to clear up all the details, but the first stones had been laid. Now, it was just time to carefully build a foundation. Interacting with some of these programmers gave him another idea. The lack of social media was just a huge inconvenience at this point, and he had some ideas to change that. Keeping that in mind, he used the first payment from S.H.I.E.L.D. under the new contract to lease a new building in Redwood City, California. The building was going to get furnished as soon as a tender for all the necessary pieces of equipment was going to be put out. By then, he would have to find his prospective employees, which was going to be a real pain in the ass because he would have to weed out the spies from S.H.I.E.L.D. Then, a thought struck him. Why not use S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to my advantage? A smile slowly came to his face as a plan began to form in his mind. Jane was carefully wading through a string of calculations again and again in search of something that was frankly out of her reach, but at the same time, she felt like she was at the cusp of something. When she had chosen to study astrophysics, she never expected that her attention would inevitably end in M-theory. More specifically, she was interested in space anomalies that occur in the universe, and she believed she had found a possible way to detect black holes and tears in deep space. Jane sighed, placing her hands on either side of her head as she stared at the sea of equations and half-formed multidimensional stress sensors. She was sure that she was close to a possible theory of explaining it all, but when imagination spilled into reality on her paper, she was at a loss. With the present set of mathematical equations and recent leaps in string theory, the study of a graviton was nearly impossible. Most scientists even object to the concept of a graviton, but she was sure it existed, even though all her attempts to detect it had failed. That didn't mean she was ready to give up. She just needed to find a way to get more equipment that could generate better readings. But that was easier said than done, as her own research budget was limited, and access to cutting-edge equipment was costly. Besides, even if she somehow manages to find the equipment and has the money to lease its use, she might not get access on the grounds that her research was a dead end. Graviton research was not that interesting to the scientific community at large because of the rarity or impossibility of its existence. Her own father was of the opinion that graviton research was a dead end, which made her eager to pursue the elusive particle. While there were huge implications to the inexistence of graviton, it outweighed the pros if it existed. Her research so far has made her convinced about the existence of gravitons, and she was sure this quantum of gravity, if studied closely, would unravel the secrets of an Einstein-Rosen bridge, which had innumerable applications. Gravity was, after all, a universal power prevalent in the entire universe, binding it together. She strongly believed her research could contribute significantly to string theory, which has so far contributed so much to the scientific community despite its remaining just a theory. Half of the math she used in her own research came from the subsidiary research into string theory. "I can see smoke coming out of your ears, Jane." A voice from her immediate back startled her, but she calmed down when she noticed it was her friend Karen Rose. "Oh, it's you. You startled me. Can't you just knock before you come in?" "I nearly had a heart attack," Jane complained as she swiveled around in her chair and stared at her friend, unimpressed. "I did knock on your door several times." "You were just in your own little world," said Karen, smiling impishly. "Sorry. I was just working." Jane sighed. "Yeah. I can see that. You have bags under your eyes, girl. You need to get some sleep." "What I need is more coffee," said Jane, hoping to get back to her work to no avail. "No. What you need is a good night's sleep and some fresh air. Now, come on. Get up. I am driving you to your apartment." Jane didn't want to, but after consistent nagging from her friend, she caved in, and that's how she found herself in Karen's car. You have to take this slow, you know. You are just 21, Jane, and already you are a research fellow. Most people don't have a diploma at your age. What are you saying? Asked Jane, frowning at her friend. I'm saying to take slow, measured steps. We can't change the world in a single day, much less a year. You are young, so enjoy life a little bit. It might even give you a fresh perspective on how you view the world. This coming from someone who is just 2 years older than me, said Jane with a deadpan look. That makes me 2 years wiser than you, and I have been taking this motivation class a few blocks from my home just to keep my edge, you know. I am just giving you the advice I received from better people who know life better than you or me, said Karen with a shrug. Jane rolled her eyes at Karen's comment and merely stayed silent. When the car turned a corner, and her apartment drew close, she let out a relieved sigh. As the car pulled over to the street, she was out of the door and on the sidewalk by Karen's window in a flash. My, you have some speed on you, Jane. In a hurry to be with your cute boyfriend? Asked Karen with a wink. He is not my boyfriend. Wait, what do you mean, cute? How did you see him? She asked suspiciously. You are not that difficult to track, and I know you go out with the guy for dinner. But that's just because we go to the same restaurant, she said indignantly. You tell yourself that. From what I saw, you were cozy enough with the guy. What was his name again? Jane didn't get to answer as a guy barged into her, pushing her away from the car. She fell down on the street and flinched as her assailant fired a gun up in the air. She tried to get up, but her right arm flared up with pain, and she fell back with a hiss. Her assailant dragged Karen out of the car, and then the security guard of her building barged into the thief. Punches and kicks were thrown between them, and then a gunshot. She felt wet, and a woman was screaming like there was no tomorrow. Her vision blurred as she fell, but her head didn't hit the road. All she saw was a set of sparkling gray eyes and sandy blonde hair before darkness consumed her. Stabilize the neutrino concentration to 3 kervons. His order was carried out as the neutrino gun began to stabilize, courtesy of Optima, and the readings began to normalize. Status of antiproton containment field. Operating within safe parameters, Optima reported. Run diagnostics. He rubbed his hands eagerly and took in the results. Quantum field stabilized, came the chime from Optima. Check. Graviton readings within range. Check. Antimagnetic shielding operational. Check. Negative energy density at XO3. Check. Exospace containment field at full capacity. Check. Phantom drive operational. A smile blossomed over Syrian's face as he finally managed to restore the phantom drive. Good work, Optima. Thank you, sir. Syrian relaxed in his seat as one of the major components in his ship was restored. We are one step closer to our end goal. Any progress in drone restoration? 7 more are operational. With the present energy output, we should be able to complete work on the main engines within 2 months. What about the relays to thrusters? Syrian frowned. Thrusters have suffered extensive damages. They will require a major overhaul or an outright replacement at the worst. That's disheartening. Syrian commented as he frowned in thought. He knew that a major rework was needed owing to the new power source, but he had hoped to maintain some of the previous systems. It would have helped to speed up the interior modifications of the ship. With a new engine core, thrusters have to be retuned to achieve maximum efficiency, said Optima. I know. Just thinking out loud. Syrian sighed as he continued his work on a DSS, Deep Space Scanner, drone. The device was fairly the size of a dog, but it would be instrumental in charting the wider universe. Right now, he was as blind as an owl in daylight. He had no idea of safe exospace lanes and no access to any star charts. While Kryptonian star charts were outdated, there remained some information in the databanks that would have been useful if he were in the DC universe. With his present location, it was highly unlikely that the star charts in his database would be of any use. So he needed to map out the Milky Way galaxy. As a first step, he needed to scan the Sol system. After mapping the Sol system, he had to decide on placing a satellite station and continue to map out the rest of the galaxy and perhaps the rest of the universe. If he were lucky, he would gain access to star charts from other alien civilizations. But he was not banking on that outcome, to be honest. The chances were slim, but if he somehow encountered friendly civilizations, it would speed things up. He had no current design to stay on Earth permanently. He knew that sooner or later, his identity would be exposed, and he would be treated as an alien. It'd be naive of him to think of himself as a normal human despite wishing for companionship on Earth. Instead, he found his unique situation to be a great opportunity. He was offered a chance to build a new civilization in his image. This was a wondrous opportunity, and he was not going to waste that time needlessly playing the hero. Then why did you save that security guard and chip in to capture the car thief? The question came from the deep recess of his mind. The answer was also right in the metaphysical tongue of his mind. Because that was the right thing to do. George, the security guard, was the father of 2 children, and he couldn't let the guy die when he had the power to help it. He had seen the bullet fired from the shooter's gun just as he turned the corner. To his eyes, the bullet was moving at a snail's pace. He didn't want to blow his cover, and that was the only reason he couldn't speed along and physically block the bullet. Nonetheless, he did manage to mitigate the impact of the bullet by burning off half the bullet with a concentrated blast of laser from his eyes. The bullet did punch into George's abdomen, but the guy was spared from any serious injury because the bullet was blunted and its speed was considerably lost with his actions. This helped Syrian concentrate his attention on Jane, who was about to split her skull open on the floor. Before she could crack open her skull on the floor, he yanked her into his arms and kept her relatively safe. A scan with his eyes told him that Jane was safe sans a small injury on her arm. This left him free to deal with the shooter, whom he was quick to bash headfirst through the car's window. The guy could barely pull the trigger before this happened. By the time the shooter regained his bearings, the local PD had arrived, taking him into custody. Overnight, he became a cool guy among the locals. That day, he was hounded by some local journalists. Thankfully, he managed to evade the worst of it by immersing himself in work. Most of the time he was on the island looking after the progress made by Optima. With events heating up in Virginia, he gathered spending a few days here would keep the heat low. Not to mention, the time spent working with S.H.I.E.L.D. was drawing ever closer. The work on his new company was also progressing at an accelerated pace. He had been hunting for talent online by organizing a friendly programming contest. He felt like a dark web hacker for recruiting people for his company in this way, but this was the easy way to find talented people for the kind of work he had in mind. For recruiting, he created a website and gave out specific assignments. Those who completed the assignments first would get a cash award along with a job offer. Most of these assignments were trials to complete a specific set of coding. Having access to a surplus amount of money at the expense of the criminal underworld certainly helped to speed up the recruitment process. The only part where he was lagging right now was mastering dimensional energy. Without getting access to the Ancient One for a considerable amount of time, his training was suffering. He planned to take a long vacation when he was done with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s project, but until then, he was forced to confine his training to a few hours a week. There was no point in overthinking certain matters, he thought with a sigh. He stood up from his seat and looked outside through the ship's glass panes. The island remained untouched by man's depravities, and many species called it home. His eyes could see every creature on the island, and he could hear each movement they made. He was truly wielding a terrible power, and he would have gone insane if it weren't for the shiny necklace on his neck. He pulled back his shirt and took in the innocent-looking necklace that was gifted to him by the Ancient One. He had requested aid from her to regulate the super senses that were making him lose sleep every night. At first, it was easy to rein in his senses, but after each passing day, they expanded across the globe. Standing in Virginia, he could hear guns firing in Africa. It was at this point that he decided to ask for the Ancient One's help, which turned out to be a lifesaver. The necklace blocked his senses whenever he activated it, which helped him sleep soundly at night. When he was awake, he had no problem controlling his senses, so the necklace was not needed during the day. He touched the buckle of his belt, and his body was now covered in a thin polymorphic fabric exosuit. Optima, assign a few drones on the DSS and chart out the data that we collected from the Hubble. Yes, sir. Nodding to Optima, he blasted off into the sky, quickly charging up his speed to hypersonic. He had learned that he could hide his movements from any radars or thermal scanners if he surrounded his body with an energy barrier that kept him out of the US defense systems. With this useful ability, he could fly as much as he liked, and he would not be exposed to S.H.I.E.L.D., who was trying to find his base. Flying was something that he enjoyed out of the power-up he received, and he was happy he could now use it without any worries. As his destination began to close in, he doubled down on his speed and stealthily made his way into a shady alley. The exosuit on his body retracted back into his belt buckle, exposing his normal clothes. He carefully traveled through the alley until finally he was back in the street and walked to his apartment as if nothing had happened. On the way to his apartment, he picked up a cup of hot chocolate. Being an avid chocolate addict, this was one of the few concessions that he made to his diet plan. Even as a superpowered alien, he was keeping a diet, which was insane, but keeping a diet had become an integral part of his character. Sometimes, habits rarely change. Passing through the entrance of the building, he felt a strange sense of wrongness when there was no George to greet him. The jovial man was someone with whom he got along well, and now the man was bedridden in a hospital. Of course, he had footed the hospital bills, as he knew it would be hard on the family. Times were tight, and jobs didn't pay as well as they used to in Virginia. He hoped it would change, as people were finding it hard to afford basic necessities. As he was about to go for the elevator, there was a sign posted outside that it was out of order. Shaking his head, he went for the stairs. Even with superpowers, he hated taking the stairs, which he admitted to being a psychological problem that had grown out of habit. As he neared his floor, he could hear heated shouting from above, and the sounds were not of people that he was used to. He boosted his pace but held back using his senses. Stepping into the hallway, he saw two guys, one Mexican dude and a giant white guy, engaged in a shouting match with Jane. "Why don't you just say where the guy is, sweet pants, and I won't have to break that good arm of yours?" The giant white guy threatened. "How about you piss off?" Jane growled. "What is going on?" asked Syrian as he moved closer to the trio as he realized the two men were hostile. Jane was making faces at him, but he didn't get the meaning. "You mind your business if you know what's good for you, dude." The Mexican growled threateningly. "Let's just all calm down here, alright? Why are you bothering her? Can't you see she is injured?" He tried to placate the guys. "Hey, amigo. Isn't he the guy?" the Mexican asked the white guy, pointing at Syrian. "Is he?" The white guy frowned before taking out a picture and began to compare. "Yeah, this is the guy. Are you Syrian Vex?" asked the Mexican, now standing close to Syrian in a threatening manner. "I am." The guy smiled and threw a punch straight for his abdomen. Syrian caught the offending arm in a firm grip and twisted sharply until a snap was clearly heard in the hallway. A kick to the left knee saw the Mexican cry out and fall on the floor, bawling his eyes out. The white guy took out a knife, but Syrian had to do nothing as Jane smashed the guy's balls from behind with her legs. Syrian couldn't help but flinch as he took in that image vividly into his brain. The white guy fell on the floor with a noisy thud. "Nice, but a very disturbing image that will be hard to forget. He commented on the kick of the century from Jane. I practiced, said Jane as a way of explaining herself with a shrug and a proud smile. Do I want to know on whom you practiced? Asked Syrian with a raised eyebrow. You wouldn't know. Jane just waved her one good hand as if it were water under the bridge. A painful moan from the large white guy put a stop to their conversation. Syrian slowly walked forward, leaving the Mexican crying in pain, cradling his broken wrist toward the white guy. He placed his right palm on the shoulder of the white guy and began to squeeze. The guy began to whimper as the pain started to flare up. I just have a single question. Answer that, and you too can be on your merry way with no more injuries. If you refuse, you will have a broken arm like your friend over there. I will talk. I will talk. Please don't break my arm. The white guy begged. Good. Now, who sent you two clowns, and why? Asked Syrian as he eased the pressure. Lloyd Morrison sent us. Who? He asked curiously. Lloyd Morrison is a dealer. He goes by the name Baker in the streets for cooking drugs. It was his guy you messed with on the street, and he doesn't like it when other people mess with his men. Really? And where can I find this Baker? Asked Syrian, his lips twitching up in amusement at the silly name. I don't know, dude. Syrian began to increase the pressure of his hold, and the guy cried out in pain. I don't know, man. I swear. My buddy and I were just given a few bucks to rough you up. That's all we know, man, the man desperately cried. He stared hard into the wide, frightened eyes of the guy and finally decided to let him go. Get the hell out of this building and fix that guy's wrist, he ordered, placing a few dollars in the guy's pocket. If I see you two again with this same attitude, a broken wrist and smashed balls are going to be the least of your worries. Now, scram. He watched the two thugs wobble out of the building and felt a little bit bad for the guys. But hey, they were being mean, and he did give them a few bucks for any medical bills. That was pretty generous of him, and he believed that he should even out the karmic odds. That was quite hectic, but I loved it, said Jane with an excitable grin. You've been cooped up in that apartment of yours for too long, he said with a shake of his head. You try spending 24 hours by yourself with a broken dominant arm. The only good speck of light in my dark days was a documentary about Captain America and a book on black holes, said Jane, turning up her nose. Yep, you need some fresh air. How about a walk, he offered, and the way Jane's face lit up was enough of an answer. Alright, but don't think you can weasel out of that bet we made, said Jane as she closed the door behind her. I hoped you would have forgotten about that, but a bet is a bet. Expect to be dazzled by my amazing cooking skills in 2 days, Miss Foster. So, two random thugs just wandered into our guy's apartment. Fury scoffed as he read the recent report. Should I be worried that our agents are losing their edge, Coulson? Asked Fury, staring down at his most trusted agent in S.H.I.E.L.D. Our men did inform me, sir. I ordered them to let the events play out, said Coulson, not too bothered to be under his superior's scrutiny. I see. Fury stared a little longer before he turned his gaze to the monitor where the details of the baker and his gang were on full display. And how did Vex react? He smacked them down quite easily and broke the wrist of one Mr. Santiago Cruz. Other than that, our guy was restrained. You plan to let the baker know that his goons failed, don't you? Asked Fury as he leaned back in his seat, looking expectantly at Coulson. Only with your permission, sir. As you know, this will be risky, and there is a certain room for error. Coulson said awkwardly. Fury sighed and looked at the screen once more. The more he read about this baker, aka Samuel Jones, the more he was apprehensive about what was about to happen. The guy was a textbook psychopath, and there was no telling how the situation might evolve. Not to mention, This guy's dealings with the Irish gang based in Hell's Kitchen and some shady organizations required more scrutiny. He preferred to keep the existence of aliens from the public for as long as he could. There were already enough problems on his plate, and he didn't fancy adding alien-obsessed hippies into the mix. At the same time, he was curious how Vex would behave in certain situations. There was only so much he could learn with psych profiles. The true measure of a man could be known only on certain occasions when emotions are high. While Vex was an alien, he looked remarkably similar to a human, and thus he was curious to know what makes the guy tick. Bring me a plan that involves the least amount of public exposure, he found himself saying in the end. If we're going with this plan, I need to know we can control the narrative if something leaks to the public. Will do, sir. Coulson nodded. Coulson. Sir. I don't have to tell you that this is a dangerous game. We must keep our hands clean in this matter. No digital communication is to be established with this Baker or any of his subordinates, warned Fury. We will keep everything analog, sir. Coulson nodded sharply. Good. You may go. Fury watched Coulson leave before letting out a sigh. The WSC was exerting enormous pressure on S.H.I.E.L.D. right now. The existence of alien civilizations was no news to the agency, but an alien with the strengths exhibited by Vex was unheard of by S.H.I.E.L.D. Of course, he had explained to the WSC members that Carol Danvers had similar strengths, but that made them all the more paranoid. Unfortunately, the WSC was not satisfied with his answer. They wanted a magic bullet against Vex in case the guy turned hostile, which was easier said than done. S.H.I.E.L.D. had little intel, if any, on Vex's abilities. The lack of any generic data was also a serious impediment to studying the Kryptonian race. There were serious implications that Vex was an immortal being. S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists were baffled by the lack of a single cell in Vex's personal belongings. The present theory was that Kryptonian biology was different, and any dead cells would self-destruct rather than linger in the environment. If this hypothesis was untrue, then the only plausible explanation would be that Vex is immortal. This complete lack of knowledge about the Kryptonian race was concerning for many analysts and WSC. With Vex refusing to share any further details about his people because of the recent falling out with S.H.I.E.L.D., the WSC was not happy. This was why he was now ordered to focus on super soldier serum more than ever. Fury knew that his predecessors had tried and failed to cook up a serum on the level of Abraham Erskine's serum that delivered the perfect super soldier in Captain America. Many attempts were made, and most ended in abject failure. The one that neared perfection was with Howard Stark, but that was lost, and records indicated that the Russians were involved. Losing Howard Stark was a blow that had set back S.H.I.E.L.D., and the man was one of the greatest casualties of the Cold War. Another was Janet Van Dyne, callsign the Wasp, who gave her life and saved the world from a nuclear apocalypse. Like the two, many died for the sake of a safer world. Even after the fall of the USSR, the location of the serum remained a mystery. The random appearances of the Winter Soldier were proof that the serum worked. The only problem was that they had no clear evidence of whether the serum was used on the Winter Soldier. It was possible that the Winter Soldier was just an extremely good Soviet operative. With the possibility of the serum working and the presence of a superpowered alien on the planet, the higher-ups were keen on recreating the serum. Already, a project was underway in Culver under the oversight of General Ross. He was not keen on developing the serum, but if it succeeds, he would not be terribly unhappy. For the time being, he was keeping an eye on the project from a distance. This would let him react objectively. Not to mention, he would be able to keep other parties from interfering with the project. If the project succeeds, S.H.I.E.L.D. would surely benefit, as they have a stake in the project, even if Ross believes otherwise. What is dimensional energy? Sirian was before the Ancient One sitting cross-legged at the beach while a few miles north, his ship was getting repairs done. The scent of the sea and the warm climate were soothing for training in what he considered to be spiritual arts or magical arts. He didn't know what the exact terms were, and his teacher was not so keen on using specific terms either. This is a good question, but one with no definite answer. The source of all energy can be traced back to the creation of the universe, a cataclysmic event that unleashed chaos on a scale unimaginable for any single being to comprehend. As such, the basis of dimensional energy is creation itself, explained the Ancient One as she drew dimensional energy and began to form solid constructs by simple gestures of her hands. But was it just merely creation? If creation is the origin of all the dimensional energy, then what is the source of creation? Asked Sirian even as he stared in wonder as the Ancient One began to project images of a chaotic universe. Death is the prime mover of all things living, Sirian. Death is the catalyst that created what you see here in the present. What we call the dimensional energy is something that is derived from the death of what was once before the present existence. That doesn't make any sense, he complained with a disappointed stare at the sorceress. The nature of existence follows only one rule. Cycles of time. Anything and everything can only be measured in time. Time is the yardstick for life. The present universe that we occupy is merely birthed because of the death of the previous one. In time, this world will die to give birth to another. When that happens, matter will convert to energy, and energy will convert to matter, said the Ancient One. This feels like spiritual bullshit. He commented in a deadpan manner. Truth can be spiritual because both work to remove the veil we have on our senses. Both are intended to remove ignorance and enshrine wisdom in our minds, said the Ancient One with a serene smile. Sirian felt that she was just messing with him, but she was very proficient at masking her true feelings behind a calm exterior. So, he could never know whether she was lying or telling the truth. Even her heartbeat was perfectly steady throughout the conversation. Let's leave it at that and concentrate on the energy aspect. If I am absorbing dimensional energy as you do, then why can't I perform spells as you do? I have tried to perform some of the spells you taught me, but at some point, I hit my limit in stabilizing the constructs. The Ancient One hummed in thought before she reached out and took both his hands into her own. Channel your energy into my body. He blinked in surprise at the request. Say what? Channel your energy through your arms. I will do the rest. The Ancient One explained and looked at him expectantly. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and willed what he identified as a warm feeling within himself. He could feel a gentle warmth spread across his heart and flow through his limbs. He was careful to keep the flow of energy contained as best as he could. It was like trying to hold back the sea with a fishnet. No matter what, the sea would easily slip in, and the same is true for the well of energy inside his body. He opened his eyes and saw with his own eyes that a silver aura was disappearing into the Ancient One. For a time, he continued to channel this power into his teacher, who broke the connection at some point and went into a trance. Once again, he suspected this was part of the theatricality that she regularly engaged for some reason. I think I have a better understanding of what is happening to the dimensional energy you are absorbing, she finally said as she came out of her trance. Truly? So what is the verdict? He asked eagerly. Patience, Sirian. Dimensional energies ought to be treated with due respect and discipline, the Ancient One said serenely. Having said that, the Ancient One stood up, and he closely followed. I will mull over this energy and meet with you next Sunday. Till then, continue the training methods that I taught you to regulate the flow of your energy. She then created a portal with her sling ring and stepped into it, giving a hasty goodbye, leaving Sirian annoyed for some reason. To blow off some steam, he decided to fly a few rounds around the island and then return to the US. He was just about to fly right next to his apartment, but then he remembered that he had some shopping to do. So he quickly changed tracks and carefully landed in a secluded corner near a grocery store. It took him more than an hour to buy all the essentials, and he was on foot on his way to his apartment. He liked taking walks, as they gave him access to street vendors. He found a good one that served lemon blueberry sweet rolls, which were his favorite in another life. Just as he was tucking in his new purchase and eyeing some other vendors, he heard gunshots. People began to scream and run away, panicked, thinking it was some loony nut who was taking to the street to have some fun with the latest semi-automatic available in the market. He touched the necklace on his neck and released the enchantment that blocked out his senses. It was a little difficult to filter out the sounds coming from the street, but his eyes found the culprits. To his surprise, it was a gang of thugs wielding a bunch of semi-automatics and firing randomly into the street. A local PD mobile unit was close by, but the thugs threw a grenade into the police car, followed by suppression fire. He took shelter behind a shop and just kept track of the gun-wielding maniacs with his X-ray vision. He noticed these thugs were well coordinated, and they were even careful to take out any cameras in the street. He winced as the police vehicle exploded, and the sound roared in his ears. He found the 2 cops injured near the car, and one had his leg blown off cleanly from his knees. The other had shrapnel stuck in his body, but the guy would survive for sure. The thugs now started to fire into the buildings, and he could hear cries of children as some were getting hit. He forced down the urge to involve himself, but it was a tough one. He was just getting a sensory overload of people crying desperately for help. He closed his eyes and began to reel in his senses one by one. Despite what was happening, he could not afford to declare himself openly. "Hey, boss. We found the guy." Syrian opened his eyes, and he was met with a curious sight. There was a guy in a mask pointing a gun at him and calling for his buddies. And everything began to click in his mind. The random shootings, needless terror, and blindly rolling over everyone were not just random acts of terror. These guys were here for him and not for anything else. He took in the carnage around him and felt angry. He let go of his senses and allowed them to expand. He discreetly touched his belt buckle, and he felt the tactical suit encompass his body. A half-mask formed on his face, ensuring that his identity would remain secure. The air around him vibrated as he exerted a considerable dose of power through his body, and then he moved. Time stood still for those who moved at a slower pace, and for Syrian, it was as if he were surrounded by sloths. He was right before his would-be assailant and threw him headfirst into a car that was parked on the street. One by one, he began to take down the assailants, breaking their spines, collarbones, and every bone in their bodies so that they would never walk in their lives, even with the best treatment available on Earth. His eyes heated up as he saw the blood and gore on the streets, and he fired off a stream of concentrated laser blasts that tore through the vehicle of the thugs. All of this happened before anyone could blink, and he blasted off into the sky, spearing through the air straight for his apartment. He urged himself to go faster and broke through the window of Jane's apartment and stood protectively before her, who was at the gunpoint of another thug. He saw the bullet move slowly out of the gun, and he waited patiently until it struck his forehead. The inevitable result was that the bullet flattened itself on his skin and fell on the floor. The thug who fired the bullet just looked on, completely confused, and stared dumbly at what transpired. "I believe you must be the baker?" Syrian asked, but he received no answer from the thug except for a flustered look. That was fine with him. He was not here to have a conversation with the guy. "I am afraid you will not be baking anything in your life." Now, he could see a healthy dose of fear and rage in the guy's eyes. He caught the guy's wrist in a tight grip, sharply turned it, and punched straight at the baker's elbow. There was a sickening crack followed by a painful howl, but he was not done yet. He turned the guy around, and a sharp jab with his fist saw to it that Baker's spine fractured beyond healing. For good measure, he kicked the guy out of Jane's apartment, breaking a few ribs in the process, and closed the door. "You! What? How? What happened?" Now it was time to face a confused, angry, fearful, and stressed woman. Isn't his life great? The universe held many mysteries. Those who study the nature of the universe are faced with many questions. What was the basis of matter? What was the source of all energy? Can something be born out of nothing? How did the first molecules form? Could intense heat and the gravitational pull of stars be the soul for life on a planet? Could it be that dark matter is the source of creation? If so, then what created dark matter? Is there a purpose to human existence, or are we just one tiny insignificant spoke on the great wheel of evolution? These were questions that haunt a genuine scientist committed to the path of seeking knowledge. The thirst to know the truth of the nature of the universe had been the cause of the scientific community across all civilizations that rose and fell in the world. Jane was no different from her peers. Her passion for science was ignited when she learned about the stars in school. From then on, outer space always interested her. She would read dozens of books and journals to sate her thirst for knowledge, to learn all the intricacies of space and its mysteries. The fundamental quality of a competent scientist should be the ability to keep an open mind. This she learned from her father, a renowned astrophysicist. No matter how inane something sounded, Jane believed it should be given due consideration. Assumptions based on preconceived notions were not a good trait for a scientist or science in general. No matter how crazy an idea may sound, it had to be studied and put under the scrutiny of the intellect. Science deals with facts based on evidence. Feelings and faith have no purpose in Jane's chosen profession except to keep up morale. Jane had ingrained this standard into her thought process from an early age. It was for this reason alone that she remained composed despite being exposed to one of the greatest discoveries in human history. The confirmation that there was alien life thriving outside of planet Earth was a stunning discovery. Sure, some statistics concluded the chances of Earth being the lone life-supporting planet in the cosmos to be unlikely. But statistics was one thing, and true hard evidence was another. The fact that she maintained her composure despite finding out that her neighbor was an alien from outer space was a testament to her disciplined mind. Her neighbor. Although, that discipline was wearing thin, as was her patience. She was now in a quandary, as a bundle of emotions were pulling her mind at the seams. A gnawing fear budded in her mind, but that was being eclipsed by her boundless curiosity and thirst for knowledge. Not to mention the shock and awe she felt when thinking that she had been living so close to one of the greatest discoveries in human history. Her mind was filled with questions upon questions. She wanted to know so much about the wider space and the civilization of Sirian. The fact that Sirian looked so much like humans also interested her from a scientific perspective. There was no way in hell that he had human physiology. The fact that he could move faster than human sensory organs could perceive already let her know that Sirian only looked human. Then, there was the most important question of all that was burning in the back of her mind. Why Earth? Why did Sirian come here? A question that was born out of fear generated in her mind. She realized that it was her survival instinct. It was the same fear she would have felt if she were in a room with a lion or a tiger. But rather than asking these questions, she was just sitting on a chair in her kitchen, watching an alien cook food for her. The bizarre situation she found herself in made her reclusive, and a part of her mind smothered the questions that blossomed within her mind. The sound of oil getting heated startled her and pulled her out of her thoughts to the present time. Her hand remained in a sling, and more than anything, she wished her hand were free of any injury right now. Not that she had any notion that her hand would be helpful. It just felt like she was unsafe with an alien in her house, which she thought irrational. If Sirian wanted to do something to her, he would have done so by now. She blamed all those conspiracy theories and shoddy alien invasion movies for the fear she was having right now. Then there was the simple fact that she was breathing right now because Sirian saved her from a bullet to the head. If anything, she should have felt more fear towards her fellow human beings rather than an alien. "Hey, don't just laze off in that chair, help me," said Sirian, pulling her out of her thoughts. "Oh, sorry. What do you need?" she asked as she jumped from her seat a little too quickly. If Syrian noticed her nervousness, he certainly didn't comment on it. He merely asked for pepper. Jane found the powdered pepper in a nearby drawer and hesitantly placed it near Syrian, who was chopping an onion into fine pieces. She felt the urge to return to her chair and keep a healthy distance from Syrian, but she resisted. Jane flinched slightly when Syrian dumped the onion, pepper powder, salt, and garlic into the frying pan. This was followed by adding pork chops smothered in flour, some tomato slices, and a few sliced green chilies. A few minutes into the cooking, she forgot all about the alien matter and was wooed by the heavenly smell filling her apartment. 10 minutes later, Syrian turned off the flame, and their dinner was ready to be served. As Jane put a small slice of the pork onto her tongue, her mouth flooded with taste. "You do cook well," she hummed and began eagerly taking in the chops, a slice at a time, with her fork. In her enthusiasm, she let her hand out of her sling, and thankfully, she was feeling better. "What? You thought I ate raw meat or something?" he asked jokingly, but it gave her pause. The thought crossed her mind after she learned about his alien origin, which was embarrassing. "I'm surprised you are not denying it," said Syrian, but she was relieved to note that he was amused rather than offended. "I blame all the hostile alien themes in the movies and books," she mumbled as she continued to eat the food on her plate, the heat flooding her cheeks. "Truly? I expected you to hound me with questions instead of keeping it all in," he commented, and something in her mind just broke. Perhaps it was the insinuation that she was weak and therefore afraid to ask questions, but whatever it was, she asked the first question that came to mind. "Where do you come from?" The second the question was out of her mouth, she felt a huge relief, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulder. "I'm from planet Krypton of the Rao system, in an unidentified sector of space by human standards, far away from this galaxy." She was unfamiliar with the names, but that was expected, seeing as these are alien names. But then she picked up on the fact that Syrian had been speaking fluently in English ever since she knew him. The names of his planet and the star system also sounded English, which doesn't mean that the language should be English, but there were similarities. "Why did you come here? And for that matter, how long have you been on Earth?" she asked eagerly now that some fear in her heart had abated. "It was not my intention to arrive on this planet. My ship malfunctioned, and I was stranded on your planet. I believe it has been 3 months since I landed on planet Earth." Now, that surprised her. She thought he had lived on Earth for far longer than 3 months. Either Syrian was lying for some reason, or he was intimately aware of Earth, as she doubted he could blend in so easily in 3 months. Only 3 months. "You speak English so fluently, and you have behaved like a human all the time I have known you. Your language is somewhat similar to my native language. Although I don't know why you would think other civilizations are different from your own. Most civilizations in the universe are not that different from human society." "There are more aliens?" she asked in awe. "Sure. It is a big universe, and there is bound to be life flourishing in distant star systems," he said with a shrug as if that were normal. To him, that should be normal, but for her, it was anything but normal. But, we've never encountered alien life except you," she said, already chastising herself for not considering the possibility that multiple civilizations may be out there. Could it be that you have not met an alien species because your government keeps any discovery secret?" Syrian smirked at her, and she blinked confusedly for a moment before it clicked. "Oh. That's actually possible." She frowned in thought. "Is that true? You are asking me?" Syrian looked amused. She blushed at how that came off. Of course, why would he know what her government was covering up? Sorry. From my experience with your government agencies, it is almost certain they are covering up." Syrian trailed off as a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. "Who could that be?" she muttered. "Don't worry. It seems your federal government is here," said Syrian, which stumped her. What? She looked at him in horror. You'll see, was the calm reply from Syrian. Jane opened the door to see a man in a black suit with a pleasant smile on his face. Agent Coulson, he introduced himself and flashed his badge. Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division. I've never heard of it before, said Jane with a frown. Now you do. May I come in? I'm afraid I'd like to discuss some matters with Mr. Vex and you. Please come in. She let the agent into her apartment. A few minutes later, she was sitting beside Syrian on the couch, reading a file on the gang that attacked her and the people of Booker Street. Never mind the fact that a government agency she had never heard of was involved in keeping Syrian here on Earth. A few major spine injuries and some broken legs and ribs are the common injuries. Some of them won't walk ever, and some will walk funny if they get the proper treatment. So far no one has died, in stark contrast to the victims of this gang, said Agent Coulson with a neutral expression. You did a number on them. They deserved it. I mean, just look at the lives lost. These thugs fired at children. Jane scowled. You won't hear any complaints from me, Miss Foster. From questioning the members of the gang, they say they retaliated for beating up 2 of their members, said Coulson, looking at Syrian. But he did that to defend me. Jane defended her alien friend. Either way, the cat is out of the bag, and a lot of people got caught up in the crossfire. From now on, please keep us in the loop, Mr. Vex, said Agent Coulson. Jane noticed a strange look pass through Syrian's face, but he just nodded in agreement. Good. Coulson nodded appreciatively before turning on her. Now, Miss Foster, I don't have to tell you that the nature of the information you stumbled into accidentally is not public knowledge. We would appreciate it if this stayed that way. The last thing we need is mass hysteria on the streets. Can we expect your discretion and cooperation? Yeah. I guess so. She nodded distractedly. Good. In that case, I shall take my leave, said Coulson as he stood up from his seat and walked towards the door but paused halfway. Oh, I almost forgot. We are taking care of the drug cartel of Mr. Baker. You won't hear from them again, and we have managed to keep what truly happened in the shadows. As far as the public knows, the law enforcement officers took care of the gang. Thanks, I guess, she said hesitantly, seeing as Syrian remained silent. We will keep in touch. Have a good evening, Miss Foster and Mr. Vex, said Coulson before he disappeared into the corridor after closing the door. Jane went back to reading the file that was still in her hand. Just reading through the report gave her chills about this gang. The victims and their families of this gang violence are certainly going to be traumatized for a long time, from what she read. Consequently, she felt a whole lot of appreciation for surviving the attack on herself without a scratch. She looked at Syrian sitting beside her, who was deep in thought. If it weren't for Syrian, she would have most likely been dead or worse. Thank you for saving me and all those people. Jane smiled and squeezed his hand in appreciation. I think my presence may have just endangered more lives than it would have otherwise, said Syrian with a frown. Don't be like that. Without you, I most certainly would have died. Even if you were not here, what makes you think that this gang would not have harmed anyone? I guess you are right in a way. In a way. I am always right, she said with faux indignation. She noticed a small grin on Syrian's face, and she smiled to herself. She had noticed that her friend rarely smiled, and now she knew the reason. He must have been feeling homesick all this time. Well, either way, I believe I am the victor of that bet, right? You owe me a tour of your campus. Syrian shifted the topic. I guess so. But don't you think that reward was not that great for what you did? She asked playfully, her heart thundering in her body. What do you? It was at this point she kissed him. For a moment, she thought she made a mistake, but before she could pull back, she felt Syrian kiss back. She had her hands wrapped around his neck and immersed in the kiss. When they came apart, she was breathing heavily and found herself sitting on his lap. That was. Syrian trailed off, looking thoroughly out of his comfort zone. Long overdue, Jane finished for him. She had a feeling she would have to pull him out of his shell on this one. Jane. Is this okay? Syrian asked, his mind in flux after the kiss. She answered that by taking off her top and pulling him into a kiss once more, only for the pain to flare up in her arm, but she paid it no mind. There was a point between joy and ecstasy, a point where the mind and body were just filled with contentment, which made one ignorant of the rest of the world. Jane had never felt this feeling of contentment. Not wanting to do anything was not in her nature. There was always something she wanted to do, but at present, she felt that contentment. She felt like she did not need anything and just lay back on her bed doing nothing without care for the rest of the world. The irony was that she came to this feeling after a night of doing a whole lot of other activities. And she had the alien who she was treating as her personal pillow to thank for that. Without moving her head, she looked around a little bit and was relieved that the darkness in her room had yet to go away. Which means that she still had some time before sunrise. Not that she was going anywhere, as she was supposed to stay in her apartment because of the injury. Her bedfellow, on the other hand, didn't have the luxury to take a day off. Now, that made her think about what exactly Syrian was working on with the government. She frowned but knocked that thought away and pressed her body further into Syrian. She didn't know how long she lay there in her bed with her head resting on Syrian's heart. The steady heartbeat most likely lulled her to sleep again, but she woke up when a pair of fingers glided through her locks of hair. It was soothing and almost therapeutic, and she let out a groan of satisfaction at the ministration. "Jane, are you awake?" she heard Syrian ask. She didn't bother to respond but merely snuggled further into Syrian's chest, basking in the warmth she felt. "Jane, it is morning. It's time to get up," said Syrian, this time slightly shaking her. "5 more minutes," she groaned out. "I don't think that's a good idea, Jane," said Syrian, which disturbed her peaceful sleep and her plans for using Syrian as a pillow. "What is the hurry? Did you forget today is Sunday?" she mumbled groggily. "I know, but I've got to do something urgently." Syrian insisted, and she could hear a hint of panic in his voice. "Do what?" she asked as she dragged her head up with a considerable effort to look properly into his eyes, which she found to hold needless alarm in them. "I've got to burn your bed and the sheets." Jane blinked confusedly at Syrian. Of all the things that she expected to hear after a night of lovemaking, this was not the line she had expected from her bedmate. "Come again?" "I've got to burn the sheets and your bed, and we need to clean this whole apartment." Now, she was sure she was not dreaming as she was faced with a hysterical Syrian, which was a first. "What do you mean?" She didn't get much of an answer except a panicked look from Syrian. A few minutes later, she stood witness as Syrian packed her sheets into a plastic bag. Her bed was folded up and carefully tucked under Syrian's arm. She watched all of this with a disapproving frown as she sat on her couch wearing only a t-shirt. "Be right back," said Syrian, and then he blasted off into the sky from her open window. She had no idea where he went, but this was the most bizarre experience she had ever had with another guy. If anything, she should have been the one to panic. Till yesterday, she had no idea alien civilizations existed. Now, she slept with an alien, and somehow, she was not the one panicking. Go figure. Jane snorted. A rustle of wind blew her hair all over the place and before her stood Syrian with a relieved look. She watched him with a frown as he opened her refrigerator and began gulping down water from a bottle. "What was that?" Jane asked with folded hands. "Sorry. I had to ensure nothing remained of our early night activities," he said uncomfortably, which didn't explain much. What do you... Oh. Now, she understood why Syrian was behaving as if the Russians were after him. "Aren't you being a bit overly paranoid?" she asked tentatively. "There is no such thing as overly paranoid, Jane. But the government, this shield won't just go through my room, right? Right?" Syrian merely gave her nod, and she gulped nervously, now feeling seriously worried about her privacy. "Well, they shouldn't be doing that," she said indignantly. "I am sure they have their reasons. I am an unknown alien entity, and it'd be remiss of them not to use every trick in the book to acquire an advantage over me." "Are you defending them now?" she asked with a frown. "No. Merely making an observation. You should get some rest and rest your arm a bit." Jane blinked and looked down at her supposedly broken arm. Strangely, she could not feel an iota of pain or discomfort from her injured arm. "Actually, my arm has never felt better," she said before taking some experimental swings. How about that?" Syrian let out a tired sigh as he sat back in his seat, sifting through piles of data he pulled from the Hubble and the star charts he currently possessed in his ship. The stark difference in technology made the data that he mined from earthly instruments almost useless. It'd require a whole lot of different algorithms to weed out the useless and faulty parts of the data he mined. Nonetheless, the data that he pulled would accelerate his plans to find a distant planet where he could set up his new home. The only saving grace in this situation was that he had the drones working for him, and by the end of next month, he would be able to launch a scout ship. He was fortunate to have taken an exploratory vessel from Krypton. It housed 4 scout ships and a myriad of technologies. Without all of this, he'd have surely struggled. The only thing he lacked was a Genesis chamber, but he did have the specs secured in the ship's memory banks. "Sir, I have a query." Syrian faced the main drone that Optima preferred as a medium of communication. "Ask away, Optima. Why are you seeking out another planet? The plan was to settle on Earth, was it not?" That was a genuine query from Optima. Before he executed his plans to escape, he had planned to stay on Earth and even look after Kal-El. It was the least he could do for Jor-El, who took him under his wing and indirectly helped him escape Krypton. But Kal-El was not here, and he certainly had no obligation to stay on Earth. Sure, he had some lingering feelings for his former home, but that same attachment was also there for Krypton. He felt that if he allowed Krypton to pass into irrelevance, he would be doing a disservice to all those who perished. Theocracy and bureaucracy had damaged Krypton to its foundation. In this new Krypton, he'd build a better civilization, one that would be perfect and not the imperfect, failed state of old Krypton. But this was not the only reason he was seeking a new home far away from humanity. There was just no way that humanity would be comfortable sharing their planet with an alien entity. Especially one that was powerful enough to wipe out their entire species in a matter of weeks. He could already see that there'd only be conflicts in the future if he decided to stay and integrate into human society. "Even if I don't turn against humanity, there is a chance that one of my descendants will, and no matter the cause, the end result will be disastrous," he thought grimly. He knew he was just wildly speculating, but there was a chance he could be right. He couldn't help but imagine what a catastrophe that might be. His descendants may not have the same temperament as he does, and with the stunts, humanity would pull on them. He shook his head and sighed. The latest incident with Baker and his gang came to his mind. He did not for a moment believe Coulson's act of total ignorance in this matter. He suspected S.H.I.E.L.D. played some role in this scuffle with this Baker fellow. However, it was possible that Hydra may have acted without S.H.I.E.L.D.'s knowledge to spice things up. He didn't care either way. Their petty attempts to play this game made him all the more certain that he should look elsewhere to build a new home.
Hydra, S.H.I.E.L.D., or whatever they name themselves, they all belong to humanity. And if he knew anything, it was that humanity discriminated against anything that was different. They even find differences amongst themselves. Krypton was hardly any better, and he didn't look forward to living with a target on his back. He was tired of living with all these differences, and he had no interest in getting tangled up in their games. Fury and his colorful friends in tights could go hang themselves for all he cared. If they gave human life so little value, then there was no point in creating an amicable relationship with the leaders of humanity. I have found humanity hostile to coexistence. It'll prove to be a disaster if I decide to stay on Earth. Besides, I don't think it will be healthy for any of my descendants to live on this planet. Human society is extremely greedy, and I see their society rotting from within, he answered Optima. Despite all this, he realized the merit of staying on Earth for the moment. If he wanted to recreate a new Krypton, he needed to fill this new planet with life. He can't just clone his species and expect nature to accept his judgment. That would be unnatural, and Krypton's destruction was proof of the danger inherent in a cloned civilization. Not to mention the warning Ancient One delivered was also in his mind. The new Kryptonians must be different from him for their own sake. Life must be unbound and free to flourish. Most of its excess could be trimmed by building a compassionate society. Krypton's failure came from its lack of compassion, and hence it devalued life. Krypton saw life as a means to an end. It coveted knowledge and tried to bring order to something that has always happened through natural selection. Krypton failed to take into account that nature was the arbitrary judge of life and that life should happen with minimal interference. "Shall I initiate Project Genesis, sir?" asked Optima. Sirion looked away from Optima to the genetic material sample he extracted from Jane's bed, along with a whole lot of other samples he collected. While he surely did rush away to destroy any traces of their copulation, he thought better of it. So now, those very samples he meant to destroy would help him learn of the possibility of creating a human-Kryptonian hybrid. If such a union were possible, he could create hundreds of thousands of hybrid Kryptonians without the harmful effects of Kryptonian cloning. With a wide variety of DNA available from the human species, he could recalibrate the cloning technology to eradicate the compulsions inherent in Kryptonian cloning. This was already a given, as he had no access to the codex. The only Kryptonian DNA he had was his own DNA, and that would be the foundation of a new Krypton. But first, he needed to know whether the human and Kryptonian genes would be compatible. The MCU humans were a different breed than regular humans, or the DCU humans. He had to find out more about the human genome in the future when he could study a variety of samples. But one thing was for sure. It was almost impossible to safely procreate with a human female. He had to exert a tremendous amount of self-restraint last night so as not to crush Jane by accident. Tough days were ahead of him, and he had made steady progress so far. Soon, however, that would change as he was about to extract the resources that he needed from Earth and build a new future for Krypton. Under my guidance, a new civilization that'll be detached from the failures of the past will be born, Sirion thought. Initiate Project Genesis.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.